Lake Mills City Council, February 21st, 2023. Can we please have roll call?
Ms. Curler?
Here.
Mr. Waters?
Here.
Mrs. Bishop?
Here.
Ms. Quednow?
Here.
Mr. Fields?
Here.
Thank you. Can everyone please rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can everybody please stay standing? And I'd like to invite City Manager Gregg to the podium to give us a statement about Chief Yandre.
Thank you. Chief Todd Yandre served the City of Lake Mills Fire Department with distinction for 41 years. In 1995, he became the first full-time employee of the department, serving as the Deputy Fire Chief and Fire Inspector. In 2019, Chief Yandre became the first full-time Fire Chief of the department. Chief Yandre's personnel file is filled with accomplishments, accolades, and certifications detailing a life of service, commitment to excellence, and lifelong learning. Chief Yandre was always seeking to better himself and the department in pursuit of providing the best level of service and care to our community. I did not know Chief Yandre for a long time, but I was fortunate to be able to work closely with him for the last several months. His knowledge and experience were an invaluable resource to me and to our city. He was generous with his time and welcomed any opportunity to showcase his department and the men and women who served in it. His pride in the members of the Lake Mills Fire Department was clear. During my initial tour of the fire station, he expressed his gratitude and amazement at the donations and contributions from the volunteers and members of the community that transformed the station into a place the firefighters could be comfortable in while taking time away from their families to protect our community. Chief Yandre's true legacy will be the hundreds of firefighters he trained and mentored during his time with the department and as an instructor at Madison College. It is impossible to express how fortunate our community was to have Chief Yandre leading our fire department. A community of under 6,500 had a chief that was respected and recognized by public safety officials across the state. We at the city will certainly miss him as a leader and as a friend. Our thoughts and prayers are with his wife, Monica, his children, Jordan and Catherine, and his 3 grandchildren, Cora, Zoe, and Bryn. Thank you.
Thank you. Can everyone please remain standing and join us for a moment of silence? Thank you. All right. I know the fire department has some activities going on tonight, so they're not able to join us. But it's been a long week, and I know it's been a long week for the community and especially for the fire department. So thank you for the wonderful statement. All right, next on the agenda, correction and/or approval of City Council special meeting minutes of January 19th, 2023, and the regular meeting minutes of February 7th, 2023. Any feedback?
I'll move approval of the council special meeting minutes of January 19th and regular meeting minutes of February 7th.
I'll second.
Motion by Ms. Curler, second by Mr. Fields. Any further discussion?
All those in favor, raise your hand. It's 5-0. Thank you. Correspondence. Mr. Fields?
I met with one of our local residents. He wanted to discuss EMS issues in person. And I also received a couple of emails on EMS, one of them this afternoon. I attended Officer Wayne Wallace's retirement party last week. And then also got an email reminder that there is a Jefferson County meeting on EMS this Thursday morning. That's it for me.
Thank you. Ms. Curler?
I have the same context regarding the Jefferson County Exec Committee meeting on EMS coming up, an invitation to the town's meeting on Thursday night regarding EMS, citizen contact, and I also had an opportunity to attend the meeting that was scheduled by for local leaders, legislators, and the League of Wisconsin Municipalities that was held on Friday afternoon. Drake spoke along with a few of other mayors and city managers, and there was several legislators there on good, just information shared about the different municipalities, how the challenges of EMS are impacting them.
Great, thank you. Mr. Fields did a fantastic job. I don't have anything to add. Mrs. Bishop?
Yes, I had 3 contacts regarding EMS and our decision, and then regarding the contracted service as well.
Ms. Quidnow?
Yes, I had the EMS contacts as well as the town meeting scheduled for Thursday, invitation as well as contacts for the Brookstone subdivision and questions and concerns about Phase 8.
All right, thank you. That moves us to the public comment section. The public is encouraged to address the council at this time regarding items on the agenda. Public comment may also be made at this time on items that are not on the agenda if you've registered with the city clerk before the meeting has been called to order. The state's open meeting laws discourage action by the council on items not listed on the agenda. Please keep your comments limited to 3 minutes and state your name and address when starting your comments and filling out the sign-in sheet provided. All right, the floor is open.
I'll get mine out of the way since it's pretty simple and you got a lot more weighty issues to deal with tonight. I think you probably know why I'm here, that I'm speaking again in opposition of the sidewalk in the College Street Reconstruction Plan from the church down to Lakeshore Drive on my property. I got involved as soon as I was made aware of this construction project via a letter sent in this year, late January, and it appears it's sort of a foregone conclusion that it may happen, which is disappointing. And the fact that I wasn't involved 18 years ago when the city went through their sidewalk plan is frustrating. To date, it seems that my concerns over the topography have been ignored, the safety that I feel is lacking there. The sidewalk plan calls to fill minor gaps when and where practical, and I fail to see that this is meeting that test. College Street is not identified at all in this plan, the sidewalk plan for sidewalk addition or construction. I think there's flexibility that's being missed in this 30,000 foot sidewalk plan that should be afforded to situations like this. And in the plan, again, the minor gap is any portion of street where addition of sidewalk may be desirable, but is not necessary to provide reasonable, safe access. There's been a lot of momentum and public input on this in opposition, and I haven't heard one person speak in favor of it, which is disappointing that the process gets put on that type of railroad. I understand the efficiency for guidelines for budgetary and design I don't know how you could run the city without those type of things. However, I urge the council and staff to seek a more democratic process where residents have actual input versus the process that appears to have been put in place almost 2 decades ago. Again, thank you for your time. Appreciate the opportunity to speak and oppose the sidewalk addition along College Street from the church to Lakeshore Drive.
Could you please state your name and address?
Tom Dahnert, 234 Lakeshore Drive.
Thank you, Todd.
Is there any questions for Mr. Dahnert? All right, thank you.
I'm Steve Holman, 410 College Street. First of all, I'd like to thank Drake for a wonderful statement about Todd, and I totally feel the same way. We lost a good man. In regard to the College Street sidewalk, I spent a little time over there today and just took a good look at it. I know it's also probably pretty late in the game. I wasn't paying attention to the College Street as far as the budgetary expansion or reconstruction. However, this 2005 Strand memo dates back. I was actually on the Plan Commission back then, and unfortunately, we had some city councils over the course of time that were really aggressive in sidewalks and maybe a little overzealous. At one point, I swear they would have put a sidewalk up one side of the water tower and down the other if they could. I just think that, we're involved with a comprehensive plan right now, and some of the great vision that we're having with future development is one thing. However, this is an older part of town. Some of those houses are over 100 years old. I think some of the same things just simply don't apply in the older part of town. And I'm actually bringing something to the Plan Commission, hopefully this next meeting, so we can address this very issue of creating a zoning code that's favorable for new development and still be fair to the existing part of town where we were founded on. When back to the actual sidewalk itself, as a contractor, I just would be willing to bet that this will be one of the most expensive lengths of sidewalk to date, with the topography, the size of the tree roots, the deep fill, the compaction. There's a relatively high retaining wall there that's going to have some sort of railing or something. And I'm a proponent of the council, obviously, of using boards and commissions as advisory panels. However, the Public Works Board voted 3-2 on this, and this is not this is just hearsay because I didn't attend the meeting. But one of the yay votes was the person said that they'd rather walk on Lakeshore Drive, but it was because of the consultant's comments that swayed them to go that way. I think what we need to create is, with our consultants, I think we need to create a more contractor-driven back and forth with them. I think that we should possibly have a work session with the Plan Commission and the City Council so we can get some of these issues, the background of some of these issues, so that we can communicate with our consultants better. Like I say, to go and use a document from '05 to be a major player in this particular instance, I think is just simply, I don't know, it's just wrong. And I'm against this particular piece of sidewalk, and I'm not against sidewalks. So I don't know how else to go about it this evening, but I know you're probably to budgetary approval. However, maybe this could be bid both ways, and then when you take a look at it, I just don't think there's a need right there. Thanks for your time. We'll be talking again.
Any questions for Mr. Holman? Thank you. Any other public comment tonight? Last call. All right, thank you. Public comment is closed. City Manager's report.
Unless there's any specific questions, there's some documents included in your packet. If there's any specific questions you have about anything, I'd be happy to answer them.
On the EMS report, there was one that had a red line on January 10th where Lake Mills EMS did not respond. Do you have any background on that by chance?
I don't, but I can find out and send something out to the city council with details on that specific call.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? All right, thank you. Councilmember board reports and acceptance of minutes from Public Works Board of January 10th, 2023. Any additional comments on that Public Works Board meeting?
I don't have anything to add, but I'd be happy to answer your questions.
Okay. Any questions? Seeing none, we'll accept that into our minutes. Moving on to council business. First order of business is a confirmation of council president's board/committee appointments. The first one is Michael Nesemann to the Parks Board. That is a term that ends in 2024. We can take this one at a time.
I'll make a motion to confirm the council president's appointment of Michael Nesemann to the Parks Board.
Second.
We talked about Mr. Nesemann at our last meeting. Is there any other discussion or comments? Seeing none, let's just do a raise of hands. All those good with the appointment to the Parks Board of Michael Nesemann, raise your hand. 5-0. Move on to the next appointment, which is Gregg to the Economic Development Commission. That term ends 2023, so hopefully she'll get reappointed in May, because we're only a couple months away. Jan is a HR executive in the past and very involved in the community. I know that she's a high-ranking person with Club 55, so if we can get a motion.
I'll move to appoint Gregg to the Economic Development Commission.
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Fields, second by Ms. Quidnow. Any other discussion or comments? All those in favor of the Gregg appointment to the Economic Development Commission? 5-0, thank you. Next is a discussion decision on confirmation of the city manager's appointment of the building inspector / zoning administrator of Troy Evenson. Mr. Daly?
Thank you. We're very excited about bringing Troy Evenson on board with us. Many of you may know him. He has been working for nearly 10 years with us as a consultant, as our consultant building inspector with our current contract. He brings every certification you would need on the building inspection side in order to bring all of those inspections in-house. He's a very qualified candidate. We are excited to receive his application and are excited to begin working with him.
Could we get a motion for this appointment?
I move to approve the city manager's appointment of Troy Evenson as the building inspector / zoning administrator.
I'll second.
Thanks, Ms. Quidnow. Keeping the meeting rolling. I appreciate it. All right, motion by Mrs. Bishop, second by Ms. Quidnow. All those in favor, raise your hand. It's 5-0. Thank you.
Just a point of order, I think that did have a motion number to it. I don't know if we need to say that out loud, but there was
Thank you.
Sorry, I
a
missed
motion number
that.
23-2-2-1.
Thank you, Ms. Curler.
Are we good? Great,
Yep.
thank you. All right, next, let's move on to ordinance 1252. This is the second reading. Sam is helping us out tonight. Ms. Bell, can you read the ordinance, please?
Ordinance 1252, amending City of Lake Mills Ordinance 660-44, official zoning map, City of Lake Mills, Wisconsin, parcel identification number 246-0713-1214-002, owner Kingbird Real Estate 2 LLC, 397 East Tyranena Park Road, Lake Mills, Wisconsin.
All right, so that was our second reading. So there's no action needed tonight. Our third reading will be at our next meeting where we'll actually take a vote on this ordinance. Is there any questions for staff tonight? Anything from staff tonight?
For the third reading, we will have our consultant planner present to answer any questions as well.
All right, fantastic. Thank you. Moving on, presentations on contracted emergency medical service proposals. I'll turn this over to the city staff.
We have two organizations here tonight to provide a presentation on their proposal to provide contracted EMS services to the community. With your permission, we can start with Cambridge Area EMS, and their presentation will be up on the screen for you to follow along with.
All right, Cambridge, please. Cambridge, welcome to the podium.
Thank you. Well, first and foremost, before we jump right into this, I just wanted to take an opportunity to echo the statements that were made earlier about the fire chief. I personally didn't have an opportunity to get to know him on a personal level, just knew of him, and definitely a reputation that was just second to none, just an incredible reputation, an incredible individual. So it does feel a little bit unique to be before you tonight. Just so soon after this happened, but we also understand that it is extremely important that we discuss emergency medical services, and I know the fire chief would want that conversation to continue. So I'd like to pay my respects and my condolences to the city and to those of you that knew him so well. So what a great man.
Thank you.
My name is Paul Blount. I'm the chief of Cambridge Area EMS. Thank you for the opportunity to come before you tonight for this proposal. At the end of the proposal, if it serves the council, I will certainly answer questions or can be available by email and by telephone after the proposal, and be happy to answer any questions as well. Next slide, please. And the next one. Next one. Option one. I'm going to briefly discuss each option, and I'm guessing that we will have a discussion in more detail at the end or at another time. So option one is a 24/7, 365 paramedic ambulance for the city of Lake Mills. The crew would be housed at the city of Lake Mills Fire Station. The approximate per capita rate on that would be 60. Option two, 24/7, 365 paramedic ambulance for the city of Lake Mills. This ambulance would also, through an agreement, be available to respond to the town of Lake Mills if there was an agreement made with them, and any other surrounding townships if we made any agreements with them that belong to the district or that are contracted with the district. The ambulance and crew would be housed at the City of Lake Mills Fire Station. There's a per capita range of 40 to 50 per capita. The reason for the range, and we can go into that in more detail, is related to discussions and agreements that we may make about paid on call being able to be available, also for part-time to be available. This rate that I'm giving you in range would have the ability to be an ambulance that would be full-time staffed or could be full-time, part-time staffed, could be full-time, part-time paid on call. That's the reason for the range. Option 3 in a pamphlet or packet that you may have been given did have a typo in it. It is the same per capita, which is mentioned at the end, 40 to 50. Option 3 includes a 24/7, 365 paramedic ambulance for the city of Lake Mills. Again, this ambulance would be potentially available through contract or district agreement to respond to surrounding townships, including the town of Lake Mills and other townships that may be interested in a contract or district agreement. The difference in option 2 versus option 3 is the potential to find a different building, a separate building, to purchase or rent other than the city of Lake Mills Fire Station. Why would that be significant? Again, the per capita rate doesn't change, but it certainly could increase the cost to the city, and it could increase the cost to the surrounding townships. If we were not able to use the fire station, we would have to purchase or rent a separate building. I think one of the many important points of my proposal summary would be this. All options include 2 additional district ambulances available to respond to your community from the Cambridge Fire and EMS District Station. We currently have a total of 3 ambulances. 2 would continue to be housed at the district fire station in Cambridge. 1 ambulance is staffed 24/7, 365 with a paramedic crew. The other one is staffed during peak times, weekends and nights are our current district peak times with paid on-call members from the community. One thing is for sure is that we respect our community members, the City of Lake Mills firefighters, City of Lake Mills EMS, Lake Mills EMS members, and at Cambridge Area EMS we have a great respect for our community members that respond 24/7, 365, and they respond, they put aside their family, they put aside their full-time jobs in a lot of cases, some of them are able to leave and respond to our emergencies. So that additional ambulance in Cambridge is a paid on-call ambulance. Again, these 2 ambulances most certainly would be available to your community, to the city, if we had a large-scale incident or we had back-to-back calls as the City of Lake Mills does have happen. We also have a multi-purpose rapid response vehicle that's new to the district. That is currently in process of being equipped with paramedic level intercept gear, including a EKG, a 12-lead monitor, defibrillator, all the latest drugs and interventions that a paramedic can do. That will be available for the City of Lake Mills and available for the surrounding communities. It is our goal and our aspiration to be able to have that vehicle respond for paramedic level intercepts to other communities that might be in need for a paramedic level paramedic patient care. Next slide, please. Just to give you a little snapshot, we operate in a manner driven to keep local resources within the district as much as possible. We agree that it's important to not send the last unit out of the district unless, of course, it's for an emergency call and leave no coverage for your city or for our district. We'll utilize the last ambulance within the district only for emergency calls, not for non-emergency. And we will not allow the last ambulance that's available in your city or in our district to transport past the closest appropriate hospital. Why is this important? We do our best to honor patient requests if we need to transport them to a specialty facility. We really try to respect the patient's wishes. But if it would happen to be the last ambulance within the district that was covering your city or another community, we just don't want that last ambulance to be transporting 45 minutes to Freighter or an hour to Freighter Hospital. We try to transport them to a closer facility. That way we could get that ambulance back here in the district. For disaster responses or what we consider mass casualty incidents, we reach out to all of our surrounding EMS agencies to sign mutual aid response agreements. I know that you've been discussing this at length. I know you're familiar with mutual aid responses for EMS and for fire, but just for a recap of what we do, we have mutual aid agreements with a lot of the surrounding communities by us for mutual aid paramedic level ambulances or AEMT level ambulances. And we would do the same for your city. Next slide, please. Next one. So we wanted to affirm to the city council that all ALS ambulances will be staffed by the state minimum. So we will follow, as we do now, all state minimum requirements and guidelines and follow those guidelines to a T. Our BLS ambulance is the same. All of our vehicles and personnel will meet or exceed the minimum standards set forth by licensing by the Department of Health and Emergency Medical Services Division. I wanted to touch on this briefly. We're not always looking to achieve the minimum standard at Cambridge Area EMS. We're actually looking to exceed it and exceed it significantly. So I just wanted to make sure that the commitment to the council and commitment to other communities was that we're always looking to exceed the minimum expectations. We're just not looking to get by with the minimum. Our equipment is kept in tip-top shape. We have 2 current ambulances with right around 100,000 miles. A brand new one out front with about 1,000 miles on it. We're constantly making sure that they're up to date on all services. We're making sure that all inspections are clean and clear, and make sure we take care of all maintenance on all equipment, not only the vehicles, but also our EMS equipment as well. Our full-time employees are represented by the IAFF Local 311 union representation. That same IAFF 311 union representation is also for the City of Sun Prairie, for Fitzroy EMS, for Middleton EMS, for Deer Grove EMS, for City of Madison Fire. So they're a large union IAFF Local 311, and again, they represent our full-time employees. Those rates that you see, and if you just scroll down in the slide, we'll show some rates for EMT, AEMT, and paramedic. The rates that you see for that are negotiated in the IFF contract. However, our EMT rate, our AEMT rate, and our paramedic hourly rate is the same rate that we pay our paid-on-call members when they respond to a call. It's also the same rate that we pay our part-time members. We make sure and want things to be fair and equal for all. So our part-time are not compensated at a higher rate than our full-time are not compensated at a higher rate than our part-time staff or our paid-on-call. Currently in Cambridge EMS, our paid-on-call staff are treated somewhat similar to other paid-on-call staff. They're paid a $2 or $3 a wage an hour. Ours is $3 when they're at home wearing the pager. And then if a call was to go off and they were to respond to a call, then they're paid their full wage for a minimum of 2 hours. Next slide, please. For supervision purposes, we agree that having local leadership is important to the success of emergency services. Within 1 year of our operation beginning in your community, it is our hope to provide and promote a supervisor within our pool of local employees. If you can scroll down a couple there. Thank you. So what that commitment is to you, we already have Lake Mills City and Lake Mills Township individuals working for our agency, either in a part-time capacity or full-time. Many of them have roots, grew up in the Lake Mills area, and they have roots in this area. So it would just be important for us, as it is in our current district, to be able to have individuals that understand the community, that live in the community or have lived in the community, understand the population, and know the area. In addition to working on an ambulance or quick response vehicle, our supervisor will be available to your leadership and to your city leadership 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Next slide, please. Cambridge Area EMS agrees that building a strong emergency response network is key to saving lives within the community. For that reason, we strongly agree to maintain strong relationships with all first responder agencies within the county. My point on this is that we have to have a close relationship with your fire department. In order to be successful in the city of Lake Mills, we would have to work hand in hand with your city fire department. Whether we're in the same building or not, that's debatable, and we can discuss that, but we need to have that close relationship with your fire department. We also need to have that close relationship with all other surrounding fire departments and surrounding EMS agencies. It's very important that we maintain those relationships. Cambridge Area EMS representatives will routinely attend city, village, and town meetings, fire department meetings, and any other community meetings that are deemed important for us to be a part of, and we do that today. We will provide all replacement disposable supplies to the fire departments. So if Lake Mills Fire Department used some equipment, or we needed to replace some gloves or some disposable equipment, we would provide that. About us. I'm going to quickly talk about us. And so you probably have heard or know a little bit about us. I'm going to try to cover some of the key points. Cambridge Area EMS is a combination EMS department. I know that the council is familiar with what a combination department is. Part-time, full-time, and volunteer paid-on-call staff. We're licensed at the paramedic level. That occurred in 2019. We're able to provide the highest level of pre-hospital care available to the members and visitors of our community. We currently have 22 total members, and they're made up of paramedics, AEMTs, and EMTs. And not to forget, we also have some drivers, local community paid-on-call drivers that will help us drive for critically ill patients. Currently, our district serves approximately 70 square miles, yes, in Dane and in Jefferson counties, with an estimated population of approximately 6,500. Our district includes the village of Cambridge, village of Rockdale, town of Christiana, and portions of the town of Lake Mills and town of Oakland. Small portion currently of the town of Lake Mills and a large portion of the town of Oakland. Our district has Lake Ripley, Jefferson Speedway, Camrock County Park, and more than 500,000 commuters, which I know that the city of Lake Mills has a lot of commuters per week travel on our highways. And we are honored and privileged to be able to provide care to the community and visitors of our district 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Next slide. We've got some numbers from last year and some things to cover. We responded to approximately 622 or so calls last year, medical, trauma, fire emergencies. We do a lot of auto responses with our Cambridge Volunteer Fire Department and surrounding departments as well. With every passing year, as is true in the city of Lake Mills and other communities, we're seeing an increase in call numbers and a higher need for emergency medical services. Yes, the baby boomers are aging. We transport our patients to many local hospitals, including St. Mary's, Madison, UW. As I mentioned, will pretty much go where the patient needs to go, with a few exceptions. Next to our mission statement, please. Our mission statement, which I talked about a little bit earlier, Cambridge Area Emergency Medical Services mission and purpose is to provide rapid, compassionate, cutting-edge pre-hospital emergency medical care, as well as improve the health and wellness of the citizens and visitors of our district. What would the city of Lake Mills get, and what would that mission statement mean for the city of Lake Mills? I have a few of the staff members behind me tonight. They're heavily involved in the community. Today we attended a blood pressure clinic. We went to a local school. We try to not just respond to medical calls. We want to overall improve the health and wellness of the community, work with the community, be side by side with the community to try to help them in any way, shape, or form. Whether it is attending sporting events and just being a presence there, being able to cheer on local teams, work with the schools, do blood pressure clinics, wellness clinics. That is our mission, and that would continue here in the city. Next slide is what sets us apart. Again, right back to what we were talking about our mission statement and what sets us apart from other services. We pride ourselves on building a community of respect and kindness. We show that same respect and kindness to all those that we work with, and we do our best. We're not perfect, but we certainly try in all arenas to do that. Our culture is a significant and unique culture at Cambridge Area EMS. We value hardworking individuals, and we're an inclusive work culture for all employees, realizing that we have paid-on-call community members, part-time, full-time, male, female, all different walks of life, all different backgrounds, all different religions, and our patients, same way. So we need to make sure that our workplace is that way as well. Training and learning opportunities, we're constantly training. We're trying to institute a plan for daily training, and that is so important to stay tip-top and at the top of our game as we provide EMS to our district and to surrounding communities. Our current employment advertising when we need to hire, which we currently have a hiring waiting list for full-time employment. We're constantly hiring paid on call and part-time. We use Indeed, we use flyers, we go to the local community colleges. And lastly, next slide, a little bit about me, just so you know my background. Definitely, this is the most uncomfortable part of the presentation for me. No, not too many people like to talk about themselves. Just so you have an idea that I was a volunteer for many years. I served in a couple different communities as a volunteer. I understand the importance of volunteerism and the paid-on-call role. That's just as important in the success of our organization as a full-time member or a part-time member. We're all one equal part of the team. We're all one big team, EMS and fire. And so I bring that same thought process to the leadership at Cambridge Area EMS. I've been a firefighter and EMT for 30 years and a paramedic for 25 years. I have worked all over the United States, including southeastern Wisconsin. I have been in Jefferson County since 2017, where I've served as a police officer, firefighter, and EMT. And I've been with Cambridge EMS and Cambridge Community Fire and EMS District since 2021. I'll take some questions. I can email answers to questions, whatever the council's wishes are for tonight.
Thank you for coming tonight, Chief Blunt, and
my
thank
pleasure.
you for your comments about Chief Yandre. Really appreciate that. Did I see also that you served with the Navy?
Sir, I was a civilian firefighter paramedic for the Navy. So I served as a civilian firefighter paramedic, which meant I served at the Great Lakes base in North Chicago. I served there for about 5.5 years.
Okay. Well, thank you for your service there.
Thank you.
Let's open it up for questions. Any questions? Go ahead.
I've got a couple. One would be, what do you anticipate in terms of if the city of Lake Mills were to wish to contract with you, what would you anticipate you'd need for startup time? And then would there be any startup costs that are not included in that per capita?
My per capita rate includes anticipated startup costs. We contemplated and discussed startup costs and including those. However, we tried to adjust our per capita rate to reflect and include those startup costs. Startup time, I think we should start working on this tomorrow. But realistically, when a decision is made, we're going to need approximately 60 days at a minimum, at least, and that is state required. I think we can work faster than that, but the state moves at a different pace. We would need an approved operational plan. That would have to come through the state. We would need inspections. We would need a significant amount of paperwork to be filed with the state EMS office. So the limitations aren't going to be how fast Cambridge area EMS can work. The limitations are going to be more so the paperwork, the state, and all of the state requirements. Did I answer your?
Yes, I did. And I had one other question. We have had, our current service is at the advanced EMT level. And I wondered if that was an alternative that you would be willing to offer us as opposed to paramedic, and if there would be any price difference.
We certainly discussed that, and we also talked about a flex ambulance, which I know some of the council members are familiar with, where that paramedic ambulance, we could flex up to a paramedic or be at an AEMT level, and then if there was a paramedic available. That would certainly be an option that we would consider. That being said, we have a people problem, and I know that you know this. And what I mean by a people problem is we have very few people available to work. So what we have found is AEMTs are just as difficult to find as paramedics. So when we are advertising for a position, I would not want to really put limitations on, whether it would be a paramedic or an AEMT. I think we would just look for a professional, certified individual or individuals. And so when we talked about, okay, well, we can recruit for an AEMT level ambulance, the comment was, wow, well, we're going to have a hard time finding paramedics. We're going to have a hard time finding AEMTs or EMTs. We've found that within our own district. There certainly would be a price difference for that, and that would be something that I could provide potentially at a later time. Since we are a paramedic level service, that is what we are most familiar with, and that's what our ambulances are stocked with, paramedic level equipment and a lot of paramedic level training. So that's why you got the proposal that you received. But again, there would be a small, slight price difference for that per capita, and I could get that to you if that's something that you would prefer. That being said, it would come down to a people problem. It's really hard to find people, period. And I know that even Starbucks is advertising for higher pay than a starting paramedic in our district, and that's just the reality of it. So that's why we proposed what we proposed tonight. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Fields?
Well, kind of two questions, one for our staff also. Did we send out an actual RFP, kind of laying out what our expectations or what we wanted?
We did not do a formal RFP process. We simply, in order to develop an RFP, put it out for a number of weeks. We're not confident that we would get responses back in time after that process in order to meet the deadline of having an operational plan approved by July and have an ambulance staffed by July 1st by whoever our provider is. I reached out directly to a number of providers, more than the ones who are here today, and the two that are presenting today are the ones who expressed interest and capability in serving.
Perfect, thank you.
Mr. Fields, I know you're a numbers guy. I've watched previous presentations, and and I say that with a nice smile on my face. So I did I'm going to give you some real quick numbers so we can kind of keep this in mind as we proceed. So the difference currently in our wage is, as you saw, that number isn't very, very big difference between an AEMT and a paramedic. So when I break down in front of me, I have health insurance, dental, life insurance, state retirement, clothing allowance. Those are all the same. So it's going to cost us the same for health insurance, dental, vision, life insurance, state retirement, pension, and clothing. So our only true difference in the AEMT, at least for the labor side of it, as I know you discussed with the consultant, labor would be the difference of $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 per, depending on where they land, if they're a AEMT lieutenant versus if they're an AEMT. So yes, so in your mind, you could quickly say if it was all AEMT, there's going to be $5,000 to $7,000 to play there. Then, of course, we're talking about equipment, and I know Mr. Fields knows this. Providing paramedic level equipment is a little bit more expensive. But again, that's already on our ambulances. That's on our district ambulances. It's on all three. It's already there. That's another reason why you didn't get a equipment startup charge or a charge or fee. That's already there for our district. So,
All right, kind of one follow-up question I'd have for you then is, I know without a formal RFP, which makes it a lot more clear for me because you're kind of under the gun making it up as you go here. But Lake Mills is a little bit unique with two high schools.
yes.
So there's usually 4 occasions during the summer when we staff an ambulance at each high school for the different events. And with yourselves at Cambridge having one, that could mean on some nights you'd have 3 ambulances out just to cover special events then. Yeah, is that something that you've considered or looked at? Or we do have a lot of different special events that we've had, multiple ambulances here with our triathlon and different events. So I guess kind of what would your take off the cuff for some of that stuff?
Mr. Fields, extremely important to make sure that we have those additional ambulances. So that would be something that I think Cambridge area EMS is a little bit unique because we're such in close proximity to your city. We have 2 additional ambulances besides the one we would potentially staff in your city. So yes, those 3 ambulances would be available for some of those resources. Of course, we have to make sure our 911 is covered. So if you did the quick math, if you had an ambulance at each high school, that'd leave you 1 for the entire district. In my experience, when I've had large incidents where I've been a chief or a battalion chief in another district, we contracted out with a private ambulance provider for those bigger things where we could not adequately cover it as a district or as a city ambulance provider. So we would look to bring in mutual aid or contract a private ambulance to do that. Without a giant district with 5 or 6 or 7 ambulances, that type of event would be difficult. But as I research Lake Mills EMS and know that you guys, the men and women there, have had an excellent commitment to the community, I know that you routinely covered 2 calls and 3 calls at a time. And so that's why I hit hit that in my presentation, it's important that you will be able to maintain that with whatever provider you contract with. You're going to be able to need to get an ambulance out the door and another ambulance out the door and not have to wait 25 minutes or 30 minutes for just the second ambulance. So I think that would be an important part of this consideration. What I did like hearing from the city manager, one of the conversations that we did have is I would really like to collaborate with the fire department. My understanding is all of my full-time staff are firefighters. I'm a firefighter. We're all firefighter 1, firefighter 2. We all volunteer or work part-time or full-time in another community. So a lot of our part-time staff are also firefighters. So we think the men and women of the City of Lake Mills Fire Department and our men and women on our staff, we could collaborate well together. I could certainly see a vision where they could be on our ambulance and we could get them cross-credentialed and they would be able to work on our ambulance and we would be able to assist them on their ambulance as well, knowing that they have one that they've purchased. And that, again, throwing that ambulance into the mix adds another resource, an additional resource. Am I willing to make that happen? Yes, I am. We would do anything that we could to work with them to make that happen. I did talk to our medical director and discuss that fact and then some of the other facts and the size of the district and response times. And she's like, whatever we can do to provide the best service we can possibly provide is what we'll do. And if that means cross-credentialing employees, cross-credentialing paid-on-call members, we would be willing to do that to make it work. Why? Because that would provide the best service to the community. So.
I would just add to that he did mention we have an ambulance in the fire department it has passed inspection. Our next step at the first meeting in March will be approving an entity for billing. And so as we go into the future, whoever is providing ambulance service, we would like to include a provision that our ambulance can assist in a supplementary fashion to the primary service, so that if there ever was a second out call or a third out call that whoever we contract with was not able to respond to, that our fire department ambulance would be able to respond to those. And maybe that ambulance will have some capability as well to provide service to those special events.
Absolutely. Excellent idea. Excellent idea, and definitely needs to make sure it's pursued, whoever you decide to go with.
Just a quick follow-up. Who do you use for your medical director?
Our medical director is MEP, Dr. Casey Cronenfeld. She has a close relationship with the medical director, to my understanding, with the city fire department.
Is he out of Fort Atkinson or?
She didn't tell me. I just know that she had a very close professional relationship with the medical director. So that got mentioned, and the reason it got mentioned is because if we're going to have that type of open working relationship, which is a benefit to the city, we wanted to make sure those relationships were in place.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions? I'll go with a couple. You used an acronym I wasn't quite familiar with. I could guess, but I wasn't sure. ALS and BLS?
Absolutely. So ALS and BLS is, I'm sure you can guess, advanced life support and basic life support. So I know there's been some discussion related to the City of Lake Mills Fire Department and providing BLS ambulance or basic EMT basic ambulance. And then ALS is considered, in some arenas, AEMT level is considered ALS because they can give 20-some drugs. They can do advanced procedures that the EMT basics cannot. And then you go to the next step, which is the paramedic, which depending on what protocols you follow, we can give about double the amount of drugs as an AEMT and do multiple more paramedic level procedures. As this commission has maybe heard before and has been discussed in the townships, some precedence has been set nationwide that there's about a 10 to 12 to 15% of the time a paramedic ambulance is truly needed, meaning paramedic level care is truly provided to the patient. The rest of the time, those patients can be provided with AEMT level care or basic life support EMT level care. That is a true statement, but I ask the council and ask everyone in the audience that if it was your family member, if it was your loved one, would you want to take that 10%, 12% risk? And so Cambridge community and the districts that we cover, we have decided that we want that paramedic level ambulance, even if it is for 10% of the time or 12% of the time, where those true advanced paramedic level skills are utilized. We want it available 24/7. But that is a nationwide statistic, is that a true full paramedic level skills, paramedic level ambulance, 10 to 12 to 15% of the time, depending on if you're in big city, rural, there is some difference, so,
Okay, thank you.
no problem.
You had mentioned district. I think it was 6,500 was
Yes, sir.
the size of your district. Of course, Lake Mills is that size, so we would essentially double the district, or would we be a part of the district? How would that work?
So the commission, I get to speak on behalf of my commission president tonight, who's not here, but he wanted me to communicate to you that we certainly would love to have you join our district. We believe in sharing the burden, not only the financial burden, which should be low on the priority list, but the life-saving burden and the personnel burden, which is higher up. And we would welcome the city into the district, and we would certainly be willing to undergo and undertake talks with you about that. But tonight, my presentation is because you've asked for a proposal to provide a contracted service. Our end goal would not be to provide a contract to the city. Our actual true end goal would be to bring you into the district for the long term. If you take a one-year contract, that's a one-year Band-Aid. You're gonna be back here in a year. If it's a 2-year, you're back here in 2 years. I'm certainly not saying that I'm here only saying you can join the district or we're not interested. What I am saying is we're providing this, as a proposal to provide services, but we would certainly be interested in starting, conversation with you about our district and the benefits that we think it could possibly bring, not only to the city, but to the communities that are within our district currently.
So then as a contracted service, we would not have access to all 3 ambulances then?
The contract would allow you access to all 3 ambulances 24/7, 365 in the agreement. It would be obviously something that we would have to reach an agreement on in a contract, but you would have those services available.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify, because you had mentioned that you would leave 1 in the district, so that is not entirely true in this situation then.
True, in this situation, obviously, if we were providing contractual services to you and you needed 3 ambulances for a mass casualty incident, we would likely bring all 3 of those resources to your community for the mass casualty. Then what happens? Then mutual aid provides coverage. That's the same in our district currently. It's not unheard of for our district to need 2 ambulances at one time or 3 ambulances at one time. What does that mean? That means we have to call mutual aid for another ambulance. Not unheard of and pretty frequent, unfortunately, in most communities, just because we don't have a lot of extra personnel to staff a lot of extra units. So all resources, our proposal, obviously not in writing, not agreed upon with you, but all resources that we have within the district would be available to your city.
Thank you. You mentioned you had 22 staff. How many of those are full-time?
Full-time, we have 8. That includes me.
Out of those 8, how many are paramedic?
We currently have 4 full-time paramedic.
Advanced EMT?
Full-time, we have 1 advanced EMT.
So then the other 3 are basic EMTs?
And we have 1 in paramedic school that's one of those numbers about to graduate within the next few months.
Okay, and then of the remaining, I can do my math, 14, how many of those are paramedic, advanced?
Off the
and
top of my
basic?
head, I'd have to pull up this and I can certainly email it to you. Off the top of my head, I'm just going to give you approximate. We've got a couple paramedics and the rest, quite a few community members that are paid on call are actually AEMTs. So I would say that the last amount would be a pretty even 50-50 split of EMT basics and AEMTs.
So
a lot
like
of our
6 and 6.
our ambulance used to be staffed at the AEMT level before we transitioned. So anyone that has been with the district for a long period of time is AEMT. So
All right.
our numbers have increased 20%. That's something I didn't mention in the presentation. We're about 20% higher in membership than we were 1 year ago. So we are seeing an increase in membership across the board. That's not full-time staff. That's primarily part-time staff and paid on call.
Awesome. So you're the one that's you're the one that's gaining, huh?
I might have stolen one or two, but that's kind of the way it goes. And I don't want to stand before you telling you that I have the solution to all the staffing problems. I know that I'm just as susceptible. I'm trying through the staff that you see behind me, which is the true reason we're at the staffing level that we are today. It has very little to do with me, and it has everything to do with them. But we do end up losing different members to other communities, and what area chiefs will tell you, whether it's a fire chief or an EMS chief, they're saying we're all taking from the same pot. So at this point in time, if we're taking one, then somebody else is taking one, and that's really the reality of the employment, and job today in this generation. So
I like your plan of putting one unit here in Lake Mills, maybe in the Lake Mills Fire Department, something we'll need to work out. That was one of the reasons 50 years ago that Lake Mills EMS started, was that we didn't want to wait for that ambulance to come all the way from Fort Atkinson and wait on that delay. In this situation, we're going to be waiting on that delay for the second unit. I know that Mr. Daly talked about using the fire department ambulance maybe as our second call. Is that it sounds like that's something you're open to?
Absolutely.
And would that reduce the costs that we're looking at as well?
Wouldn't change the cost factor for our per capita, but it absolutely would provide better service to your community. As you know, in emergency services, police, fire, EMS, time is critical. It's everything in what we do. So having that fire department ambulance staffed, even if it was a third of the time or 50% of the time or whatever we could get it at, and having that collaboration would provide the very best. Well, it wouldn't hurt my feelings at all if we had to put the Cambridge ambulance and leave it in the Cambridge station, and the city fire department was able to get that up and running. That's certainly the best service for your community. So I think working together with them is really paramount to the very best service that we can provide for your city.
And I'm sorry, and the medical director, where is that medical director affiliated?
So MEP is short for Madison Emergency Physicians, Madison. So they are out of St. Mary's in Madison. There's a group of them, and they come out, and not only do they come out to our calls, but more often they come out for trainings, train us, make sure that we're up to date on all trainings and certifications, and we do, typically quarterly trainings with them, and they provide online medical control. Something that is a little unique to our service is we can pick up the phone and call her or her staff 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, which we routinely do.
All right, fantastic. Any other questions? Yes, Mrs. Bishop.
Yes, ma'am.
Chief, thank you for being here and for the presentation. Just a couple of questions.
Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned your willingness to work with the fire department and a possible second ambulance. How would you handle possible cross-training with the fire department? Previously, they've done, I think, every Tuesday night. Would your 24/7 team participate in that training? Would they not? How do you handle that?
We would love to participate in that training. We would certainly have an ambulance available, and would be comfortable participating in any level of training that the fire department would be comfortable having us participate in, whether it's just to stand by and be there, just in case a member would happen to get hurt, which does happen, from time to time in any community. It's a tough job, it's a risky job, and not only fire but EMS. So we'll stand by at each other's trainings, but we would be happy to get involved and look forward to having a close working relationship with your fire department. Again, I think that's extremely important.
We certainly appreciate that. My second question, and I'm trying to figure out how quickly costs will increase and maybe by how much, although I won't get that answer. When is your collective bargaining agreement due to be renegotiated, or when does it expire?
It is about to start, go back for negotiations this spring. It'll expire at the end of the year. So there will be likely an increase in wages. Of course, I'm giving you this year's numbers. I'm anticipating, as I know other proposals will as well, an increase in costs. And that is certainly something that we will have to discuss when we're ready to put this in writing and put pen to paper. But that has been accounted for in the per capita rate. But again, there is some flexibility there depending on what services you want us to provide. And again, our Our flexibility is going to be the fact that we know our labor costs are going to increase as well as our operational costs. So if we were doing, for example, a 3-year contract, we would likely have to make some changes to my proposal, because 3 years from now, can you imagine what the costs if they jump like they have in the last year? So there would have to be some changes to the proposal if the council and the direction the city went was a long-term 3-year contract. If we're talking a year or two, our numbers are pretty close to, being on. So, great question.
Any other questions?
Hi, Chief.
Hi.
I'm looking at your information with regard to the supervision that you are proposing as a possibility within 1 year of the operation beginning in the community. There'll be a promotion of a supervisor. I heard you mention something that the supervisor would be someone who is currently working in Cambridge area EMS, but that lives here in Lake Mills.
So I kind of walked through that rather quickly, so I'll just kind of backtrack a little bit, but you're pretty accurate. So what we would hope to do is we already have staff members on staff that are, whether they're paid on call or part-time or full-time actually, that have roots in Lake Mills or that currently live in Lake Mills. But we also are hopeful that we would get more applicants from your community, whether it be from Lake Mills EMS or even from the fire department, that would hopefully join our team either in a part-time, full-time, or paid-on-call capacity. That being said, our hope from that would be that we could promote one of those individuals, whether they're currently on, that's a possibility, or if they're going to join in the future. So I wouldn't want to, raise my right hand and tell you that it for sure won't be somebody that is already on that has roots in Lake Mills, but I also could foresee it would be very beneficial for us to keep an open mind and definitely consider any future applicants. And we are starting to get a little bit of a trickle from the Lake Mills area for applicants, and so that gives me hope that we would be able to find, candidates that would be able to fit the certification requirements and the requirements for a leadership position, and that we could promote them within 1 year.
So based on the current the conversation that we just heard with regard to being absorbed into your district, are you anticipating that supervisor would then report to, if we were to join your district, would report to that district? And then if we did not join your district, how would that supervisory role play out afterwards?
That's a great question, and I certainly think that would have to be discussed a little bit more in detail with the council and with, city's wishes, and kind of get your understanding. And then, of course, we would have to discuss that internally to see how that could work. My hope would be that anybody that provides you service is going to be responsive to you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So that's my commitment to you, whether you're coming within the district, which we think is the best option in the future, or we're signing a long-term contract with you to provide EMS services. You're going to get the same high level of service, and you're going to get the same responsive service. Most communities can pick up the phone and reach me 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365. I know that you've gotten that from other chiefs in your district or in your city. So you would get the same treatment even if you were contracting services. So I hope that answers your question. We would treat it the same whether you were within the district or we did a long-term contract.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Great questions, by the way. Clearly, you guys have had a few conversations about fire and EMS, so.
Any other questions for the chief here? All right, thank you for your time, and appreciate you coming in tonight, and I'm sure we'll have a great discussion on this, so thank you.
I'm sure, and just again to reiterate, I'm available by email. I'll make sure that you all have my emails. I know city administrator does. You can email me questions. You can call me by phone. I'm certainly happy, and thank you again to the council and all the respected city leaders for the opportunity. So, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Daly.
Thank you. Next, we have Aaron Ryan and Cody Letson from Ryan Brothers to provide a presentation on their proposal and capabilities to provide EMS services to the city of Lake Mills.
Good evening. I'm Aaron Ryan. I'm second generation ownership at Ryan Brothers. I do really thank everybody for inviting us. I know we've been in this process for a long time, but this is the first time we got to come face to face, so thank you. And I also wanted to send my condolences to the Lake Mills family, the Lake Mills Fire District, for the passing of the chief.
And I'm Cody Lutzen. I'm the service director for Ryan Brothers. I oversee our 911 operations. I've been involved with all of you guys for a fair amount of time. I was invited to initially start this process with the previous city manager and have kind of continued through the process. So it's nice to meet all of you face to face now. I've attended quite a few of your meetings, answered to quite a few questions already from all of you and from the city manager. So it's nice to meet you guys in person finally. So again, echoing everyone else's condolences for Chief Yandre. I got to work with him several times in the past. A great guy. So very sorry for the loss. But so I guess I can just kind of jump into it. A little bit different approach for us because we've been involved in the process. You guys have had our proposal or kind of estimate of cost that we went through. I believe it was back in December where we gave you guys our cost estimate for providing service. A very similar proposal as far as level of service. We kind of agree that the paramedic is the way to go for us. We have, because of our established service, we have approximately 20 ambulances that are all fully staffed. We have just under about 100 employees right now for EMS, which are a mix between critical care medics, paramedics, AEMTs, and BLS providers. So we have them available. AEMTs are a difficult subgroup to find, and because we already have the existing infrastructure as far as in-house training, in-house medical equipment, everything like that related to paramedics, it's a minimal cost change for us to provide a paramedic service over the AEMT service. And again, we find historically that approximately 20%, a little over 20% of our calls require some form of paramedic intervention and things like that. So we think it would be a real attribute to your community to go that route without a significant cost increase. So with our proposal, you guys have seen that we proposed to put a 24/7, 365 paramedic level ambulance in the community for you guys. That is dependent, obviously, on the size. Our proposal is dependent on the size of our response area, but there's only a fluctuation of about $2 or $3. So it's, I believe, $29.50 to about $31 per capita, depending on who is interested in partaking in that agreement. As far as secondary and backup ambulances available to you guys, as partners with us, you guys have full access to everything that we have available. We have our in-house medical direction, so we actually have a medical director on staff directly with us who works with us. He's been with us for over 30 years, an excellent medical director. We have in our own in-house training. So we have an ALS committee that provides all the training in-house under our medical director to all of our EMS providers. And we are currently in the process for developing a training center recognized by the state to train in-house EMS providers. So on top of that, our fleet, as far as available ambulances to your community, we have the one ambulance that would be dedicated full-time to your community. We had kind of talked, I know the council has talked and discussed, we're very interested in the option of, as well as utilizing your guys' ambulance that you have at the fire station now. That's a model that we've used in the past with success through cross-credentialing and developing that within the fire department. It's important that we develop a good relationship with your fire department and their personnel, and the best way to do that is to work together
train together and involve them in the process, because you can't really have EMS without fire and fire without EMS nowadays. So, and then in addition to that option, we also staff a station in Deerfield. Lake Mills EMS, your current provider, has used our Deerfield station and resources for quite a few years in the past to provide paramedic intercepts. So that would continue to be available. We typically have 2 ambulances staffed in Deerfield, which is just down the road. And then on top of that, we also have our Fort Atkinson station, where we keep 2 ambulances down in that community as well. So a couple of different community options. We also have through our Fort Atkinson station, we've had mutual aid contracts in place for quite a number of years with all the surrounding communities as well. We would look to continue that as potential options. Other things that we can, I guess, like I said, most of the stuff, a lot of our options in our RFP we've discussed kind of through the city manager. We've offered clarification on and things like that. I really think it's good to give you guys the opportunity to ask questions about our proposal and our service, face to face. I know based on the past meetings, you guys have really seemed on the ball and have a great understanding of what's going on, but this way you can ask any questions you have specifically of me or of our proposal.
All right, thank you. So I guess we'll open it up to questions then. Questions?
If I could just clarify one item, I believe the per capita rate started at $29.50, and then it varies depending on who joins the contract with us. So I think I just wanted to clarify, because I believe when you multiply the per capita rate by the service area, it came to around a $283,000 contract. So if the city of Lake Mills were to be alone in the contract, I think that comes out to around $43 per capita. Obviously, our goal is to have a regional cooperation and regional approach to provide care to the entire region and realize efficiencies over a larger district area. So I just wanted to clarify that the difference in per capita cost, as he stated, is based on how large that district is, because that drives call volume, and that if it was just considering our population alone, would be the highest rate under the proposal that it could possibly come under.
Yep, that's correct. So typically and obviously all of this, anything discussed is open for discussion and negotiation and things like that as we kind of explore the option. What we've historically done in the past, which has worked well for communities, is we would establish a contract directly with you, the city of Lake Mills, for a specified service and a specified price. The city of Lake Mills would then be allowed to contract with any township interested in being a part of that. And then you guys would determine what you wanted for reimbursement as far as to provide that service. As long as we could continue to honor our original contract with the city of Lake Mills, we would provide service for anyone that you guys were interested in subcontracting to. That's a kind of a tool that a lot of communities have used to help with the cost.
So Cody, let me get clarification there. When I did the math at $29.50, Lake Mills portion was around $190,334 to be exact. So what Mr. Daly said is that we would be responsible for $283,000 if the city was the only group that joined this arrangement?
Yep, correct. And so all of this was just based off an estimation at the time when we were asked to provide a price. So what we really used was the population of the city of Lake Mills, compared it with the population of the total area serviced by your current provider, and that's where we kind of came up with that estimate. The maximum cost, like I said, is for the city of Lake Mills only, and then any revenue that you guys bring in from additional townships is money that would stay with the city of Lake Mills. And that's where you see that number start to come down the more townships that are interested in contracting with you for service. Is that?
So the struggle here with the townships, we don't know at the time of this proposal who's in, who's out. And so we wanted to make sure you guys had concrete numbers and a concrete process, and then know if someone wants to jump in and add into your group, another township or the existing group stays, then you know how you can offset the cost, and you guys will be able to dictate what the townships pay, because they're gonna pay you directly and you keep that directly. But at the end of the day, if none of the townships participate, we have to make sure we still have that concrete number so that we're still on the same page of what the costs are. So hopefully that makes sense.
So the townships aren't contracting with you, basically they're contracting with us?
Correct, yep.
Okay. There's also a $30,000 startup cost, is that correct?
Yep,
Is
correct.
that with or without the fire department facility?
So the startup cost is just, what it goes towards is, the investment that we would have to make, to help establish our service. Obviously, this has been a year-long process already, more or less for us. It takes quite a bit of resources for us to develop numbers, provide estimates. Once, if we were to enter a contract, there's an ambulance. We would reallocate one of our ambulances. It was equipment, training, development of operational plans, the inspections that we would have to go through the state, all those processes. So it's kind of a ability, radio programming, work with Jefferson County. Basically, it's to establish the service, for you guys.
So the 30,000 is with the fire department slot. If that's not available, it'll be additional
So
cost?
that's still up in the air as far as where we can be housed at.
Right.
And then as far as the rent, if we went to the fire department, would get passed on right to you guys. If we had some other location, we would sign our lease and rent, and that just get passed on to you guys. So whatever it is, that's what it costs.
Okay.
Now that we're the 11th hour, we have limited options. So that is definitely one of the priorities among several priorities that we would have to get going on, and you guys would with whoever you pick.
You had mentioned there were 2 backups. Deerfield has 2 units, Fort has 2 units.
Correct.
So we can pull from those 4 basically?
We could. So what, a lot of times what we prefer to do, I agree with, kind of the way the discussion went. I think the fire department ambulance as a secondary is a great option because it's housed right here. It's the closest available. I think it'd be great if the fire department is interested in pursuing that. So that would be a great one, but otherwise, yes. So our ambulances in Deerfield and Fort Atkinson would be available. We would utilize a mixture of them. Deerfield is very close. It's probably one of the closest communities. Again, we've provided intercepts and mutual aid to Lake Mills previous using that station, and it's worked out very well. Otherwise, mutual aid for depending on geographical locations of the calls within, the Lake Mills district. We have great relationships with Jefferson EMS and all the neighboring communities as well. So, but to answer your question, yes, those any ambulance in our fleet would potentially be available to Lake Mills if needed.
So
Would
we
the
are
use-
really-
Go ahead.
I would say we are really data-driven, and so we were able to take, and our proposal shows this, the last 3 years' worth of data, and taking your call volume, a third of those are no transport, so we're gonna get paged to a call, we're gonna get there, we're gonna get canceled, we're back in service. That still counts as a call, but now we're not transporting anywhere. So with that starts to knock down the number of calls that you actually respond to and transport. Again, if there's 3 patients, you need 3 rigs. We'll be able to utilize our existing resources as a supplement to what's going on here. I know the fear is, hey, we have a second call, we need a second ambulance. So what the manager proposed would be great, but when we really look at the numbers, there's very few numbers that will need a second rig based on what we've been able to see here in 20 years worth of data at our Fort Atkinson 911 operations. So we feel we've been able to use that for all of our favors.
So if we use the fire department rig as our second call, does that have an impact on this quote at all?
No, it would not, because the quote is just for the primary dedicated ambulance.
All right, any other questions? Mrs. Bishop?
Okay, so let's take the $43 per capita that Mr. Daly gave us. We'll bake in the $30,000 startup cost, which was $4.83 a person. So now we're at, round up, $47 a person.
I think the top end of our quote was $31. I think it was 31.
Mr. Daly, did I mishear?
For
You're saying
32.66, I
43?
Not based on what Mr.
think
Daly said.
Right, assuming that no one joined with us.
Oh, yep.
And if it was just a City of Lake Mills contract and there was not interest in and the townships weren't interested, or they had other options that they pursued, my calculation was, I just calculated it out, multiplied it by the service area, came up with that $283,000 number, and then divided it by our population, and that gave me the $43 if it was,
Okay.
if you were serving the city population.
Yeah, I think when we gave our quote, in the proposal, it was for the existing area, which was $29.50. And then the follow-up you asked, our quote was $32.66 per capita for.
Correct.
Service, yep, for just Lake Mills, so $32.66.
Okay, so let me backtrack myself. I didn't mean to say thank you, gentlemen, for being here.
Yeah, no.
And I just jumped right into my questions. So I don't really think it matters whether I use the $43 per capita or the 31. When you bake in your $30,000 startup cost, you're then at about $47 per capita or $36 per capita if I use your original numbers. That is significantly cheaper by, almost $20 for some of these quotes when you compare it to your cost per capita for EMS. In your proposal here, you have Whitewater at 50, that's the cheapest. Watertown at 74 for EMS, I'm disregarding that. But if you take the average of the remainder, $84, $77, why is your quote for us so much cheaper compared to the actual cost for EMS in these other localities?
So that's a great question, and the reason is because of the size of our infrastructure. So for us, if we were to contract with you, we don't have to hire additional staffing. We have all the staff in-house. We do our own training in-house. Our own medical director is in-house. Our own HR. We do our own billing in-house. So everything from top to bottom is done in-house. And what that does then, similar to some of the other communities that we service, we're always significantly cheaper because those services are historically contracted out, or they have to pay outside entities to provide that. We can do it in-house, so it saves us quite a bit of money and allows us to have significantly cheap, lower costs when we give estimates.
And so that's where the turnkey option is what we can offer, and that's why that's so lucrative to a community like yourself, to take advantage of our larger operation. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. I'm digesting and thinking about it.
No problem.
Do you have follow-up, or do you want to let someone else? She's still thinking. Anyone else have a question?
May I ask one?
You can,
Thank
yes.
you.
Please.
Just for we have several of the townships here tonight, so just for their benefit, I'm wondering, is your organization open to having multiple signers on a contract rather than the city subbing out to the townships? If that was something that the townships were more interested in, as being a signer on the parent agreement rather than having a separate one with us?
Yeah, that definitely can be an option, yes. And there's more ways to do something than one way, so
Yeah.
we just gave
Historically, how
right,
it's
and
worked
that's
for
worked
us.
well,
Yeah,
but yeah, we're flexible on that.
absolutely.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was researching here. Any other questions? Mr. Fields, no question?
At this time.
Wow.
I know God brought up about how long a contract might be, and I know I mentioned to you about 3 years. That helps us spread that $30,000 startup costs over those 3 years so that we don't have to come up with as much cash right away. But if that contract got shorter, we may have to raise our rates then if it got to be a 1 or 2 year contract. So hopefully that makes sense.
A couple other, just to translate questions that you had prior, to some of the stuff, our operation. I know it was kind of discussed supervisory, how that works and things like that. So I've actually been a paramedic for 10 years. I oversee our 911 operation, and I would actually function on the ambulance here in Lake Mills, from day one. So every third day I'd be in this, if it's in the fire station, I would be there available for you guys, anything that you have 24/7. More than happy to answer questions. We like communication, and so we would obviously request some form of meeting, whether we come to a, fire and police commissions meetings every month or, quarterly meetings, however it works out, but we would make sure that we would report back to you, answer any questions that you guys have throughout the process, provide an annual report to this, committee and everything, council. So supervisory, we would be, you're looking at them, so I'd be available for you guys anytime you needed.
And then we also have a very experienced group of staff with our current makeup of EMS personnel. We also have a manager on duty 24/7. So with that, with Cody, and then we have a very sophisticated CAD system for our interfacility operations. And what would happen is a call would come in for Lake Mills. They would get paged out through Jefferson County. Our dispatchers at Ryan Brothers at our dispatch center would start to log that call in our CAD system, and then that would generate our EPCR for that crew. And so we were able to keep, so the county would have their own records that would be the same as what we have. But then by us being able to put that data in our CAD system, we'll be able to give you guys some really incredible reports. Anything you wish, we could probably produce with that. And it's a sophisticated CAD that data is king, and that's how we've really been able to become efficient, is using data, seeing what happened over the last 3 years or the last 20 years. That's really important data that we analyze on a weekly basis. And I think that's the other component, is just analyzing what happens in a 911 operation. So many things can happen. And so having Cody at the front, as well as some of our other managers that would do that, meeting with upper leadership at Ryan Brothers, we're really able to stay on track on things and making sure we're not becoming deficient on things. If we needed some additional training, we can do that. Dr. Yost is there every week. He's very involved. And so he's really made us a really great company.
Did you have a question? Go ahead.
I do. Yes, I guess I'll just ask you the same question I asked to Chief Blount, which was what anticipated amount of time would you need to, if we were to decide to contract with Ryan Brothers, how much time would you need to get something in place?
So fairly similar. We can be very quick on our end. It's really waiting for the state that, several of the things is the operational plans with the state and approvals through the state that we would wait for. But again, from our end, we have the staff already on the books. We have, our ambulances on the books. So from our end, it would be a short amount of time, but we can't anticipate how long the state would take for certain things.
And then the contract. So we could start tomorrow if we had a contract in place. And so, I think that's the other piece. Have you guys started writing the contract yet for whoever's going to provide service?
No.
I have drafts. I don't have anything that's specifically prepared with regard to this situation. I think there's a lot of, issues that still have to kind of be settled, but I'm prepared to address this issue in short order, quickly. It's necessary.
That's good. And so with the state, it's operational plan updates. It's our renewal for all of the licensed EMS. So it's first come, first serve at the state. Doesn't matter what your issue is, but you get put in line. So with all that going on, this is the worst time to put in an operational plan, just so that you guys know. But that would be our holdup, and just clarifying where our station's gonna be, and where our rig would get staffed, and where our people would sleep.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
You had mentioned that there was a contract, the contract was for 3 years, correct?
Correct.
When asked, that would be preferred.
Sure. Is the per capita rate, would that remain the same over those 3 years?
the CPI index would kick in year 2, and it would go up by the CPI for year 2 and 3. I'd assume we potentially would want to have a back end where we potentially had renewals in there, and they would just continue to be what the CPI is. And a couple of years CPI went down, and we did lose money, and that's the process. So, but CPI would be what the increase would be.
And then my follow-up question, which is actually not related to the first question, has to do with how would you build up the fire department that we have currently? How would you work together? Because that is something of concern, of course, that we've had in the past. So if you're going to be housed in the same building as the fire department, serving and protecting the people in our community with that same mentality, I would be wondering what your thoughts are in terms of how you work together with other fire department.
Yeah, great question. Paramount. You have to have that cooperation involved. So historically, we found working in close proximity, good communication, clear chains of command, how things, issues that do come up, how they're resolved, how they're worked through, things like that are very important. We have always provided, we do enjoy doing joint trainings with all the fire departments that we currently work with, all that sort of thing. So for us, our involvement would really be driven by how involved the fire department wants us to be in their operations and how we work in their operations. Typically, when we have, any larger incident besides a single ambulance, the fire department runs the incident. They are in command. We simply handle the medical aspect of it. So a lot of how we work with the fire department is driven by how the fire department leadership wants, how involved they want us to be. We will be as involved as needed. Like I said, we've done things before with cross-credentialing, first responding, all that sort of stuff are things that we enjoy doing, enjoy working with departments on, and as long as they're interested in it as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you have this tonight, but as far as Lake Mills, Deerfield, Port Atkinson, as those staffs, can you give us an idea of how many of them are full-time, and then how many are paramedic, advanced EMT, basic EMT? Could you forward that information to Mr. Daly?
Yeah, I can give you kind of just an idea. So typically, most of our staff, we have a mix of full-time employees and then part-time. Kind of similar. We don't do any paid on call. All of our employees, when they're on shift. They're housed at the station, ready to go. So typically, our ambulances in Deerfield and Fort Atkinson are also paramedic level ambulances that we staff, and then they are staffed 24/7 as well. So, but it can be a combination of paramedics, EMTs. It just kind of depends on the day. It can depend on the day of the week and all that sort of thing. So.
But we have about 25 paramedics and critical care paramedics. We would have a smaller group of EMTs, probably anywhere from 5 to 6. The rest would be EMTs. The other unique thing about us is if we had, Cody and I were on shift tomorrow for Lake Mills, I called in sick. Well, what are you going to do? Well, we would then backfill from our inter-facility operations, potentially close down a station for our inter-facility, and then that person would have high priority and they would show up here. And so we have that backfill. And I don't want to brag about our staff. I mean, we do have issues just like everyone else, but with our retention and our recruiting and how we treat our people stay with us and they want to work with us. And so that's why we have a much larger pool to be able to staff Lake Mills. And so, again, if we have to close down a rig for inter-facility, we'll do that to make sure the 911 rig is staffed.
Any other questions? All right, Aaron and Cody, thank you very much for coming tonight. Appreciate the time.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Do you have any closing remarks, Mr. Daly?
Not at this time.
All right. So let's move on. Item E. It's a discussion decision on request from Todd Temperley of Citizens for Local Governance. for use of the Lake Mills Room, also known as the City Council Chambers, for purpose of limited activity political meeting. So there is application included in our materials tonight. Staff comment?
Sure, I'll take this. You have an application in front of you for what qualifies as a political meeting. The requested space is the council chambers. Under the existing community center policy, the use requires council approval. The space itself, the council chambers, requires the approval of the city manager. In addition to the request for the space, Mr. Temperley has requested that the city use resources to record the event, and that he then be allowed to receive a copy of that recording and distribute it on his social media channels, et cetera, in regards to his candidacy for the city council position this spring. So that's really the crux of the request. There's been a lot of conversation with regard to the past use and kind of precedents that's been involved, the ambiguities that are in the community-centered policy as it exists right now, and that draft is being redrafted as it stands right now, but we're still under that policy at this time. So I think the city council has a determination to make with regard to just that, whether or not the use is appropriate here, and then probably to give staff some recommendation with regard to the appropriateness of utilizing city facilities, city employee time for recording, and then I think we can basically go from there. Do you have specific questions? Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I have a comment and some questions. So based on just looking at the policy, the activity does seem to be approvable. It has to be approved by the city council, but it's contemplated by this policy that you could have a political meeting, that the council can approve the use of this room for that activity. So in that sense, I don't have a concern. I think there seems to be a gap in our policy when it comes to the utilization of city staff and technology resources that maybe it was never contemplated when the policy went forward. So I guess what I'm wondering is what did the, for past precedent, what occurred at that time? So this, I believe this category, Mr. Temperley is a city resident, so based on the fee schedule and the policy, it would be $50, which my guess would not cover, the other costs that the city would incur providing staff and technology resources. So what happened with some of the other, similar kinds of situations? Was there another fee charged, or how did that work?
You're right on both points. I think you've analyzed this appropriately. There are ambiguities in that policy, and then we do look to kind of past practice for direction on what the intent of the document is. With regard to recent activities, the school board has held meetings here on a regular basis monthly for, I believe, years at this point. Our employee does record those. The other activities of note, township meetings, our employee does record. I believe there is some, the reason that that's done, I believe, is because of the franchise fee with regard to cable television that we collect. There have been other political meetings that this specific event would qualify as under the policy that have been held here, that have utilized these specific resources without being charged. That's where the rubber kind of hits the road. I don't want to necessarily treat this applicant any differently than those past applicants have been treated if it is a parallel situation. I also believe that whatever this candidate is provided should absolutely, in fairness and equity, be provided to other candidates that are eligible for the city council seats that are available this spring. So I think those are the salient issues. I believe that we've been pretty consistent in not charging people or entities for recording out of this specific room. To the best of my knowledge, we have not charged like the school board had a debate or a moderated event here that I think was put on by CAPE maybe a couple of years ago, and that event was recorded, and I don't believe that they were charged. So those are the examples that we're drawing from. Previous to that, there were multiple referendums with regard to change of government from a city manager to a mayoral system, and I believe that both parties, or not really parties, both interests were afforded the opportunity. However, only one took advantage, one group took advantage of that. I do not believe that they were charged for recording. So that is the issue that we're facing. I agree with you. The use in this facility, it certainly qualifies as a public public meeting under the policy, and that's appropriate here. The policy itself is a little bit ambiguous on charging for this service, and that's where I think staff has had some consternation and some doubt about application here. So what we're really looking for is direction from the city council. In this circumstance, because of what I believe is at least a little bit of past precedence, I'd be inclined not to charge for recording of this specific event and then offer that exact same treatment to other applicants or other individuals that are running for the seat in the same manner. And I think that's kind of the safest right now. I do think that in a future redrafting of the policy, you should definitely consider this, tighten up this ambiguity, and create a firm policy that does at least contemplate this specific use and then move on from it from there.
Thank you for that. I guess I would agree that it would be good for us to discuss at some point in the future, and Mrs. Bishop's been working on this policy. Yes or no, do we want to offer the service, to anybody of having our staff provide recordings? Maybe we don't, because people can do it on their phones now, but we could debate that, and then if we think we do want to offer that service, then I think there should be an appropriate fee for it, but it's not in the policy now, so I don't think it's fair to treat this applicant, differently than maybe how others have been done in the recent past.
Just one additional statement on that. I would insist that if the room is used, if our equipment is used, it should be our employee who is familiar with it, just for protection purposes and everything. Reasonable costs for that should probably be collected. I don't think the application fee or the room rental fee contemplates that or covers that expense, but here we have this past practice, and it raises an issue. It raises a concern in my mind.
Any other questions? I think Ms. Curler hits on it that the use of the room is outlined in the procedures, but the use of the city resources is not outlined. And I think we're opening up a can of worms by allowing those resources to be utilized in this fashion, and where will that go into the future? That's my concern.
Yeah, and I would definitely take a look at that policy and correct that for future circumstances like this.
So there's no motion before us, just the application. What are we being asked to do here? Because the application just has checked the microphone PA system, no charge. It doesn't have
My understanding of the request is specific date, specific time, this room, with the ability to utilize an employee to record that event, to record, not to broadcast, and to provide a copy of that recording to the candidate for his distribution.
Yeah,
I guess when I do a Google search, I quickly come upon other communities that say the use of any government property, including computers and the internet, for political activities is always prohibited.
We currently don't have a policy that says that. I think that's what you need to tighten up.
What I hear is the rub is for past organizations in the community, we have held political-oriented events, especially before elections, and that have hosted candidates, and then we have used those resources previously, maybe because there's an absence of the prohibition in our current policy. So it sounds like for this time and moving forward until the policy is actually changed, we need to consider that precedent that's been set.
And I'm not sure that it's really precedential, like binding.
Of course
But
not,
it
no.
is certainly an example of how similar requests have been treated in the past.
Right.
Any other comments or questions? So seeing none, do we need a motion to approve this application?
Yeah, I think the request, as we understand it right now, if you can with that motion, be specific and state specifically the room, the use, as well as the employee that would be able and willing and available to record.
Have we checked that Dave is available that date before we?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
All right, is there a motion?
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
So, looking at the policy, so the activity requires the approval of the city council?
The use itself, the political
The
meeting,
use.
correct.
So can we place conditions on it, such as like length of time or something like that, that would, reduce the use of city resources?
I do
Is there
believe
something
that-
reasonable that we can do? I don't think a fee, it doesn't seem like is in bounds because there's no fee in the policy.
In the application, they specify from 6:30 to 8 PM, so there's an hour and a
Okay,
half in the
So he's
application.
asking for an hour and a half,
Yep.
okay. So if we thought we wanted something less than that, we could potentially do that, yeah. I guess that's just a question. Can we put conditions on?
Yeah, reasonable conditions in accordance with the policy, I would think are appropriate.
And I assume there's no other meetings scheduled either during that time or right before that could eat into the starting time of 6:30?
Not that I'm aware of at this time. And I believe Mr. Temperley is aware of the scheduling, and he picked that date for a specific reason.
Should it include something to the fact that other candidates also have the same opportunity?
Go ahead.
I don't know, I don't think there's any harm in having that inclusion in there. I certainly think that it would be incumbent and the responsibility of the city to provide the exact same resources and opportunity to any other candidate for office that would like to use the city's resources for this purpose. So you certainly can. I don't think it's necessary, but I see no harm in including that in the motion.
Yeah.
Okay, that brings me to another question as we're thinking through this. Time is short before the April election, and this room constantly has meetings. Are we running up against an issue in providing the same service? Obviously, we want to be fair to all parties across the board. Are we backing ourselves into a corner by providing this room, specifically in these recording devices, if this room is not available, after March 16th until the election?
Yeah, and I think the other aspect of that is the approvals that are necessary, that you have to get in front of the city council at some point in time to allow the use within the community center space under the policy. So there would be a requirement for at least an appearance, an application and appearance before the council to allow that use. So that's another hindrance there.
And again, under the policy, the city manager approves the use of the room, and the council approves the political
meeting,
activities.
correct.
So you've already approved the room. If someone else wanted to use the room, they would simply have to get Drake's approval. He would check the schedule and so forth. And if it was political, it would need to come to us.
Correct. I can reserve time for the room prior to the city council action for it and essentially not take applications for use of the room at that time or not schedule something in this room at that time. So there is, I can accommodate a request quicker than it would take to get in front of the city council and at least reserve the room until action had taken place.
Can the council, with tonight's agenda item, delegate our authority under the policy to the city manager to make a decision on political activity until?
I don't see a restriction on you not being able to do that. I'm not aware of why you couldn't do that. You could probably delegate it to grounds and facilities or any other department of the city as well. I'm not aware of a restriction that would disallow that.
Like, we could delegate that authority to approve political activity until the night before the election or something?
I am a little bit concerned about that just because the policy itself, which is in existence, does explicitly state that political meetings, which this certainly qualifies as, just being temporarily proximate to the date of the election, that does require council approval. But if you're going to provide a blanket right now in a motion that says, we open the floodgates to this, I think that action would have to be honored.
And the other issue with that, so that the council knows, as I've been working with Missy, and I put this rewrite on hold until we could talk about this issue tonight. Talking to Missy, the new iteration of the draft would basically preclude political activity by candidates for at least a month before an election, because the rationale was we didn't want people like using government resources and campaigning in here possibly while people were voting outside. And so, again, as we're continuing to talk through this, I don't know that we would want to have a political meeting by a candidate in this building while there's absentee voting. And I think that happens a week prior. So for any cutoff of delegation of authority to the city manager to approve political activity, that cutoff should probably be before early voting starts. Just for those same reasons, we don't want like campaigning at the election site, and I think there are state and federal laws on that as well.
I think these are good ideas, but
Is
the
this-
revision of the policy is not on our agenda tonight, and so I think we would be, I don't think it's quite appropriate for us to like think about like delegating something until we've, delegating some general authority when we're not actually revising the policy tonight. We're just acting on one application.
But we can put conditions upon this particular application, and I think that's what, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like that's what Ms. Bishop is suggesting for this particular situation, so that we set a precedent for future use, and that we can change the policy to reflect the things that you've mentioned moving forward.
I think in discussing the fairness or whether or not we even should approve the application that's currently before us, we have to consider additional implications down the line or even in the next couple of weeks. So that's why I was addressing it, but to the extent it's not an agenda item, I'll stop discussing it, so.
I guess just to answer a piece of that question, my advice to you would be to approve the activity tonight. Attorney Drescher can speak more to this, but there is a standard that has been set at the Supreme Court level of once a forum has been provided for speech, you must allow speech to occur at that forum, and regulating the type of speech is where the city would open itself to liability. So in this aspect, we have provided a forum in the past for speech, political speech. I believe it would be against the city's interest to deny use of the facility for a similar speech as it has in the past, as the policy certainly allows for this to occur. And so, when we discuss restrictions on when a certain activity can take place, we certainly want to delve into the legal ramifications of that during a rewrite of the policy. But I think we have the policy before us. We want to apply that uniformly. And so I think right now we're trying to work within that existing policy. And that until we have taken an active step at a certain point in time to uniformly regulate the public forum that's being provided, that we just don't want to open ourselves up to that liability until that point in time, and every point from then on going forward receives the exact same treatment.
I'll make a motion to approve the application of Todd Temperley and Citizens for Local Governance for use of the City Council chambers on March 16th.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Curler, second by Mr. Fields. Any additional comment or questions?
Do we need to amend that to include, I'm sorry, Ms. Curler, because I blanked on what you said. Did that include allowing Dave to record?
I see that in the application that that is part of his request. If we think we need to clarify that or specifically authorize it, I guess we could amend it, but
I think it's probably best to specifically approve the activity and to approve the use of city resources to a city employee to record the event for the 1.5 hours that's requested in the application.
so can I, yeah, so I'll revise my motion then. I make a motion that we approve the application of Todd Temperley and Citizens for Local Governance to approve the activity, the political activity on March 16th and the use of city resources for recording for 1.5 hours as requested.
Second.
Does that cover it? Okay.
All right, revised motion by Ms. Curler, second by Mr. Fields. Any other discussion or questions? Seeing none. Sam, can you do roll call, please?
Mr. Waters?
Abstain?
Mrs. Bishop?
Aye.
Ms. Quidnow?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Thank you.
Sorry, motion passes 4-0.
All right, next on the agenda is discussion decision on College Street Reconstruction bid package that's included in City Council Motion 22-2-2-2. Sam, can you read that motion, please?
Motion 23-2-2-2, bid package approval for College Street reconstruction.
You're right, it is 23.
It's listed incorrectly.
Got all kinds of typos on this agenda, but that's okay. All right, can we have a motion?
I move to approve motion 23-2-2-2 for bid package approval for the College Street reconstruction.
I'll second.
Motion by Ms. Quidnow, second by Ms. Curler. City staff.
The College Street reconstruction plans are included in your packet. The project has been designed based on the existing standards for road reconstruction projects in compliance with the policy documents that exist currently. We are able to answer any questions that you may have. The Public Works Board did recommend to approve going out for bid for this project. And if you have questions, Mr. Hoslett has just joined us to answer any questions on this specific item. He's our consultant engineer with Strand.
Is there any questions? Yes.
It's not well, I guess it's a question, but I asked it this at Public Works Board as well. Mr. Hoslett, could you just summarize some of the improvements in stormwater management that are in this plan compared to the existing condition? Because I know this is an older neighborhood, so there's not much stormwater there. Could you just summarize what's included in the new construction?
Sure, I can do that. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So currently there is no storm sewer on College Street between North Ferry Drive and Lakeshore Drive, where the project is. And what we are doing on this project is installing about 1,100 feet of storm sewer. We have 14 inlets that'll be installed and 6 manholes, including a saffle baffle manhole. It is very similar structure like we did on Lake Street 2 years ago. A little bit smaller of a structure, but it'll still help with phosphorus and sediment into Rock Lake. All the manholes and the inlets will have 2-foot sumps in them, as directed a couple years ago. The city streets foreman, recommended that as we talked, that we should adopt that. So that's what we've done the last few years. That is now a standard practice that we would do. Other than that, it really helps. The storm sewer is really going to help any debris and phosphorus entering Rock Lake.
I would just add to that.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Please.
I would just add to that at the last Public Works Board meeting, we did have a presentation from the Rock Lake Improvement Association, and they brought up a type of stormwater management that is low cost that we thought was a good idea that we're looking to incorporate into testing it out on a roadway that does drain to Rock Lake. I'm not an expert in it, but it's a sort of catch basin that you just insert into any storm inlet. Thank you. Any inlet that, and then it catches additional debris to keep it from being discharged into the natural waterways. And so we are continuing to look for opportunities to manage our stormwater and protect Rock Lake. We understand it's an important priority, and so we're gonna take a look at this option and see if it's something we want to incorporate on a larger scale going forward.
Thank you.
So any other questions? Any other questions? Mr. Fields.
I guess we got a lot of statements here on about safety, about having the extra sidewalk in this reconstruction plan. What about with that sidewalk being so close to the garage? If there are vehicles parked there, that's clearly going to block that sidewalk on a regular basis anyways. I guess, can you give us the whole scope of why we thought this was the right way to go? What was the logic behind it?
Sure. There's two pieces to that. So the inclusion of the sidewalk in the project is consistent with the City Council adopted sidewalk plan of filling minor gaps when practical. Past practice has been it's most practical to install a sidewalk when you're reconstructing a roadway from a financial perspective and from a reduction of disruption. You're not doing two projects, reconstructing a street and installing a sidewalk. The driveway is a separate issue. At the time that the driveway was permitted, the new driveway, it was the record shows in the building inspector's file on this item that the existing driveway would be removed as it's no longer conforming with the city code. That by having the old driveway and the new driveway, that there's too much driveway access to the public roadway. So the pavement in the city's right of way would be removed at the time of the College Street reconstruction project. So when that driveway, the new driveway, was permitted, the city essentially said, this will need to be removed. We have College Street coming up at a future date. So rather than the applicant at the time taking on the cost to remove it, the city would roll it into the reconstruction project, as it's an easy thing for us to do, and it's a small addition to the cost of that project from the city's perspective. And so the driveway, as you see it now, after the project, will no longer exist. In order to keep that driveway there, a variance would need to be granted from the Zoning Board of Appeals, as it is not compliant with the zoning code.
Do you have a follow-up?
Not at this time.
Ms. Curler?
I guess I just wanted to share, there was some discussion about the sidewalk at the Public Works Board plan, and I don't want to, misrepresent anybody else's comments there, but we did, one of the Public Works Board members, Mark Picard, shared some history, at least as far as his understanding of what led to the sidewalk plan being developed in 2005, and that in the mid-1900s, it was not very common to have sidewalks in residential construction, and then people started recognizing, well, there's no sidewalks by Prospect Elementary, that's a safety issue. And so from his description, it sounded like that was some of what led to the development of that plan. And Mr. Picard's been on the Public Works Board for many years, and he indicated that they've tried to look at this, apply the policy fairly, every time it comes up, and that there have been some exceptions made over time. Those are his words. But he felt that in this situation, it is practical to have a sidewalk installed there. So it's kind of a matter of, the way he presented it, and in my opinion as well, is that there sort of is a matter of fairness that many folks who didn't have sidewalks along their properties have had sidewalks installed following this city policy over the years, and so there's sort of a fairness question that it should be applied fairly here as well. So I just wanted to pass along kind of that conversation from the Public Works Board.
Yes.
When did the new driveway get installed on their property?
Do you want to answer that?
It was permitted in 2020.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
I have one question and then a comment. For the driveway issue, if this road wasn't going to have been redone within such a close time frame of the construction of the new driveway, what course of action would the city normally have taken with the old driveway and the property owner? Would that have had to been removed at the time of construction?
Yeah, they couldn't have the non-conforming driveway without a variance, so that would have been the petitioner's opportunity, seek a variance, and then potentially, if you can meet the standards that are required in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals, potentially they could grant a variance for a non-conforming structure, the driveway. The notes from the building permitting file do indicate that this was considered and that the permits were ultimately provided for the reconstruction or the new construction of the garage with this as kind of a solution to the non-conforming driveway, that it would be fixed, that it would be brought to conforming status during the College Street reconstruction project.
Okay. Can I give my comment now, or did you want to take somebody else?
It's up to you. You have the floor.
Okay. So I drove by this house and down College Street today because I had to see it again. And I also drove around the rest of Lakeshore Drive, Aronside, Griffith, I think is the other one, Griffin, and Marguerite. And what I noticed is that College Street, this house that's on a corner of Lakeshore and an intersecting road, is not the only corner house that doesn't have, it's not the only corner house that is missing a sidewalk on the southern portion of the intersecting road. So by way of example, Lakeview Ave,
Lakeview Avenue,
where it intersects with Lakeshore Drive.
On the south side, that does not have a sidewalk, you're correct.
It does not. And that seems to be then a pattern. Fremont, I'm assuming maybe didn't have a sidewalk there.
Fremont, I believe, does.
Does currently, I don't know if it did previously. It just seems that there's a pattern of building where that south eastern corner house didn't have the sidewalk on their northern side of their property. If you go down Aronside Road, there are no sidewalks on either side. If you go down Griffith, you're missing a sidewalk on at least one side. Marguerite.
One distinction with regard to Aronside would be the level of construction of
Sure.
that specific right-of-way. I don't believe, Yeah, there's obviously a width issue there. That's not necessarily where I was going at. That road certainly hasn't been reconstructed. This opportunity hasn't presented itself, but you're on point right there. On Griffith, I believe there is sidewalk on both sides at this point.
I can't tell from the satellite map. When I drove down there earlier tonight, I didn't think there was, but I could be wrong. I just bring it up to show that there looks like there was an original pattern of thought along these intersecting roads that come up on Lakeshore Drive. And these are really historic neighborhoods. And when I look at the sidewalk that is on the north side of College Street, it does cross the parking lot and it goes all the way down to Lakeshore Drive. So it does provide access to Lakeshore Drive where you then have to cross and there's no sidewalk there anyway. And so I'm just not sure the benefit that we get vice preserving these neighborhoods and some of these street corners the way that they were maybe originally meant to be. I think there's some value in that in these areas. When I have walked these areas previously, I actually didn't find a need to have a sidewalk, even carrying a child. And so that's why when this first came up in discussion as, oh my God, we're adding a sidewalk to College Street, it didn't strike me. It struck me funny because I didn't recall there needing to be one. I didn't recall that there was one missing, whereas in other places in town I've walked, for instance, at the end of Brewster and Tyranena, or I think of specifically when you're trying to get to Lake Mills Market from the Four Corners, like how do you get there when you're walking? So that's why this area of College Street didn't strike me as needing a sidewalk here. I know Mr. Homan has spoken about something he's working on at Plan Commission, maybe for a historic overlay in this area. I just think when we're talking about the uses here, I don't know if the use here on College Street being as heavily residential as it is on that corner warrants the sidewalk, warrants the tearing up the trees here. And again, to keep what looks like an initial plan along Lakeshore Drive may be of value to our city. And that's why I just bring up that that's what I saw when I drove down there today.
Yes.
I'm going to echo what Ms. Bishop is saying, only I don't necessarily have all of that great data, but one thing that does stick out for me is that there is a crossing walk or a crosswalk across College Street from St. Francis Xavier Catholic Church to continue the walk in toward Lakeshore Drive. Also, there is sidewalk along Lakeshore Drive, so while it may be minorly inconvenient to have to cross the road for that, I feel like it would be much more inconvenient to create a sidewalk along that property which is going to result in having to take out or do something or modify the new driveway on that area just for this purpose, as well as remove some pretty ancient trees that are still in good shape. So with that in mind, I'm just going to put it out there that I will likely say or vote no for this particular upgrade. Also because hold on, I'm gonna forget his name.
Dennert?
Yes. What's the last name?
Dennert.
Dennert, thank you. I had it written down, I'm sorry, Mr. Dennert. Had mentioned there was nothing in the actual proposal that stated College Street was one of the places that needed to be given a sidewalk.
Did you have something, Mrs. Bishop?
Yes, because Ms. Quinn now reminded me of what I had wanted to end with saying last time, is that I just find it interesting to call upon a reliance of the 2005 sidewalk policy as additional rationale for this strip of sidewalk to be added to College Street, when the previous streets that I mentioned, Lakeview Ave, Griffith, and a couple other places, are also noticeably absent of a sidewalk, and those are not listed either in the policy. So, you know, I see the rationale. I totally see it both ways. But I just think to call out College Street, I know it's coming up for reconstruction, and then to use the 2005 policy to buttress that argument falls flat for me. And so at this point, absent other comment, I would be prepared to make a motion to remove the addition of the sidewalk from the bid package. So that's my motion.
So identify that as the specific sidewalk, please.
So,
From the Catholic Church along College to Lakeshore Drive, I believe is what you're looking at.
I don't think I can repeat what you just said. So I move to remove the addition of the new sidewalk on College Street from Lakeshore Drive to
The Catholic Church on the south side of the
the
road.
Catholic Church on the south side of College Street before you get to Lakeview Ave.
I'll second.
Motion by Mrs. Bishop, second by Ms. Quidnow, to remove the sidewalk as described from this motion. So, yes, additional comments.
Yeah, I have a comment on that motion. I guess I think it's interesting that we've just had a lengthy discussion about how to respond to an application based on a current policy that has some vagaries and maybe things that are missing or unclear. And you know, we made a decision based on past practice and recognized that maybe we need to change that policy. I think the same thought process should apply here. We have an existing city policy. It's been in use. It's been used by staff to direct our engineers to design street reconstruction with sidewalks. There are places where exceptions can be made, but the policy is that minor gaps should be filled in where it's practical, and our engineers, our staff memo is telling us that it's practical. So while we may, I'm hearing some of my colleagues suggest that maybe we should have a different policy, but I'm also hearing you say that we should give a waiver to the policy, and I'm not really sure why, if it is practical to install sidewalk in this area. So I'm not in favor of the amendment.
Yes.
Sure, I just wanted to state, so obviously the sidewalk plan is the adopted policy of the city council, which is what staff uses to design these streets. If this policy is no longer the will of this body, I would request that the body review and remove items from it that are no longer consistent with what this body wants to achieve. Specifically, you know, the minor gap provision in it, that if we are not going to, this is, I think clearly everyone would agree, a minor gap that under the policy would be filled. My difficulty is lack of clarity from the city council. So I have a difficulty deploying city resources to accomplish the city council's goals if I don't know what those are. And so I don't want to have another instance where we get to a point where a road reconstruction project is approved. I deploy staff resources and city funds to design that roadway to the standards that we understand them to be, and then we get to bidding and those are removed. The sidewalk policy is wholly the authority of this body and how the city council wants to see the pedestrian network built out. So all I ask from a staff perspective is that if it is no longer how we want to build that pedestrian network out, that we likely would remove that provision from the 2005 plan, that minor gaps will be filled when and where practical. You know, not every gap in the sidewalk network is going to be mentioned in the policy. I think the ones that were mentioned were at the time considered to be of a high priority to fill. And I think if you review the TAP grant that was approved by the city council, several of those will appear in this policy that are being filled. So we can implement any policy that the city council wants. We can do so efficiently and effectively. We just have to know what that policy is. And so if we no longer want to fill gaps, similar, you know, minor gaps such as this, we remove it from the policy, and that way we can move forward in an effective manner going forward, and that when these plans get brought to the city council to let for bid, that they accurately reflect the will of this body and how you expect these projects to be designed and what should be included.
So would it be your recommendation that we table this particular thing and to do as you say, look at this policy and analyze what things need to be changed? Or is this something like what Ms. Curler was mentioning, where we need to go ahead and do what the policy says because the policy says the thing?
No, you are not bound by your own policy. You can deviate from it. This is not law. I would not encourage you to delay letting this project for bid, because we want to bid at a time where we're going to get the most amount of bids, and those bids are going to be priced competitively because contractors are still actively looking for work. We don't want to enter an environment where contractors no longer need the work, so they drive up the cost of the project. So I think in this instance, if an exception is granted, that is communication to me that there's something in the policy that is no longer relevant to the goals and vision of the city council, and that at a subsequent meeting, we would discuss this policy and amend it as necessary to ensure that city staff is designing these projects consistently with the city council's vision.
Would you agree that it would be fair to say, Mr. President, that perhaps a policy that is over 15 years old should be addressed just as a provision so that this kind of thing doesn't happen again? Not all of them, not all of them.
Well, I'm one of 5 on this,
Valid.
city council. You know, as I look at this topic, I did a lot of research. I've lived in that neighborhood for 20 years and recently moved. I know how much traffic is on Lakeshore Drive in that area. There's a lot of recreation for bicyclists and walkers and runners. And you know, I look at it from a community standpoint as well. And I look at what this board has tried to do, and we wrote a strategic plan where we want to get more feedback from the community. And we do surveys to get that feedback. And one of the surveys was a recent comprehensive plan where we had 718 correspondence. Let me read what that said. 71% felt it was important for residential neighborhoods to be walkable to daily amenities such as schools, shopping, entertainment, and parks. So as part of this research, you know, I felt it was important to include that in my thoughts and what it is that we try to do here as a council. Listen to the community and what they want. When I read this statement, schools, there's a school about 3 blocks away. There's a park access. There's an access across the street from this kitty corner, right? Kitty corner, to be fair. And then, of course, the community center at the church is an adjoining property. So there's a lot going on in this area. So that of course weighs. I feel for the property owners because I know that neighborhood well, and I know how much it is to shovel that extra sidewalk. I did it for 20 years. So I straddle on this topic a little bit, but at the same time, I guess I have to look at it as, you know, what is right for the community, and that's how I'm going to base my decision. Mr. Fields.
Mr. Waters, I agree with what you're saying, but at the same time, I look at some of the older neighborhoods in the smaller streets, and my wife and I walk down there quite a bit also, that having access on one side of the street, my wife doesn't like walking on sidewalks most of the time anyways, so she fights with me on that. But this would be, I see this as a very expensive build, being on the hill there and how it would have to go. I would like to generate some, or push some of these resources, which I've tried in the past to get sidewalks out to Fayville Park. We've got parks that we don't have access to, that if we take this extra, I'm gonna make up a number and say it's $50,000 to build this because of the time. I'm just gonna throw a goofy number, it's not that much. But why can't we direct that and get sidewalks to our parks, make them safe, and then spend some money on the gaps. And Dan, I said I was making up a number.
Yeah.
I wasn't giving you an estimate.
Just so everybody knows, that
No,
number is
no.
outer space.
But I mean, by the time you
But
start breaking up
regardless,
concrete, getting trees out, I
with
mean,
regard
there's
to
some
access
value.
to, I'm not advocating any which way here whatsoever. With regard to access to parks, that is the intent of the TAP grant. I mean, there's going to be a ton of work on that in the upcoming seasons, creating connectivity. So I don't think this project takes away from that effort whatsoever, but that's just.
For the last 3-4 years, even with the old council, I tried to get sidewalks out to Fayville Park. That there are some areas we don't have good sidewalk access to some of our parks right now.
Fayville Park is part of the TAP, isn't it? Correct. I thought it was. Yeah.
But that's one we've been working on for a while, and we don't have a lot of traction quite yet, but it's getting there.
That's happening. All of the real estate acquisitions are currently occurring, and I expect that project to, start with haste.
If you're interested, Matt can speak to the cost of this specific strip of sidewalk, if the city council's interested.
Any other questions? Comments?
I have one final comment, and it's in regard to you bringing up the survey, Mr. Waters. And I've made this comment, if I haven't made it in Planning Commission, I've at least made it to people separately, that yes, sidewalks are important, access is important, and I see it as access like to the arterial centers of the city and places people need to go. I'm not saying people don't want to go to the lake or that they're not using it. There is a parking lot there. There is a sidewalk there on one side of the street, as there is to each intersecting street for Lakeshore Drive. And so for me, I see that there is access there in this area. And for that reason, I'm hoping people would vote to remove this portion of the sidewalk from the bid. But hopefully we can take a vote on this and then move forward on the rest of the item.
Any other comments? All right, can we have a roll call on the motion to remove the sidewalk from Lakeshore Drive to the Catholic Church on College Street?
Sorry, it took me a minute to unmute.
So a yes vote would be a motion to remove the sidewalk. A no vote would be to leave it in the bid.
Mrs. Bishop,
Aye.
Ms. Quedno,
Aye.
Mr. Fields,
Aye.
Ms. Curler,
No.
Mr. Waters.
No.
Motion passed 3-2.
All right, so it's been removed from the bid. So we're back to City Council Motion 23-2-2-2 with the sidewalk removed. Any further discussion?
I guess based on the question for staff, based on the last vote, what will happen to the driveway that is identified on the plan to be removed, the second driveway on the Dana property? That will remain in the plan to remove that second driveway, correct?
Absent a variance, it will be, anything within the right-of-way will be removed.
Okay, thank you.
So by the right-of-way, you mean from the sidewalk to the street?
From the property line to the street.
The right-of-way is very expansive.
So
There's a lot of
the right-of-way
on
expands
top.
beyond the sidewalk then?
Yes.
Okay.
About where the plan was, about 6 feet from the back of the sidewalk to the property line,
Okay.
approximately.
I think it went, if I recall, I'd have to pull up the plans, but if I recall, the right-of-way went pretty close to the edge of the small garage.
2 to 3 feet from the garage.
The original carriage house, correct.
The original,
Yes,
yes.
the original, yeah.
Any other questions or comments? All right.
Now, for clarity, for clarity, I think a motion for adoption as amended would be appropriate at this time.
So the original motion is not sufficient? Is that what you're saying?
You were the motion maker, correct?
Yes.
And I was just concerned with whether or not you wanted to continue with that, the second and everything. I think just reviewing that is appropriate.
Yeah, so we would treat it as that the original motion was amended based on the subsequent motion by Ms.
Well,
Bishop.
I can just make
So a motion for adoption.
I would make a motion that we approve motion 23-2-2-2 as amended.
Second.
So motion by Ms. Curler, second by Mrs. Bishop for the amended motion of City Council Motion 23-2-2-2. Any questions, comments? So we are voting on the amended City Council motion.
Correct.
Can we have a roll call, please?
Ms. Quidnow?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
All right, we're good here, right? Just to
Sir.
make sure we have clarity, okay? All right, thank you. Next is ordinance 1251. This is a third reading. Did I skip something?
Yeah, Brookstone.
Item G.
Brookstone.
I wrote over the top, there was so many notes from that last issue. Item G is the discussion decision on Brookstone Phase 8 bid package. It's a City Council Motion 22-23-2-2-3. Sam, can you read that?
Motion 23-2-2-3, bid package approval for Brookstone Meadows subdivision phase 8.
I move to approve motion 23-2-2-3 of the bid package approval for Brookstone Meadows subdivision phase 8.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Quidnow, second by Mrs. Bishop. City staff?
This is a continuation of the ongoing development of the Brookstone Meadows subdivision. This includes the installation of new infrastructure for the next phase of that project. It's consistent with city policy, city ordinance, and city standards, and staff recommends approval.
Any questions? Comment? All right, can we have a roll call on City Council Motion 23-2-2-3?
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop?
Aye.
Ms. Quidnow?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
All right, now we're on ordinance 1251. This is our third reading. Sam, can you read that?
Ordinance 1251, amending City Code Chapter 505, Peace and Good Order, and creating Ordinance 505-8, Sale and Possession of Electronic Smoking Devices.
All right, so that was our third reading.
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance 1251, creating section 505-8, sale and possession of electronic smoking devices.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Curler, second by Mr. Fields. Staff comment?
Chief Schroeder is available to speak to this ordinance if you would like to hear from him. Otherwise, I'm sure he's able to answer any questions that the council may have.
Man, I can't believe this, that the chief sat here this whole meeting. We should have moved that up.
Yeah.
Up that.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for your patience.
I don't have anything to say, but if you have questions, I'm happy to.
Why don't you go ahead and go to the podium? Thank you. I'll have to come up with a question nobody else does, but
Well, now that I'm here, I guess I have to talk, right? No, I kind of explained why we got to this point of, Officer Johnson realizing that this was a gap in our ordinances and didn't allow us to take some enforcement actions for these violations. So that was the reason behind it. I explained kind of state statute and how this plays in with it. So if you have any questions, I am happy to answer them.
Was there a driving force for this?
The driving force is just the prevalence of these electronic smoking devices or vape devices, especially among youth. We've seen, I think, in the news over the past several years of how a lot of the electronic cigarettes or electronic smoking devices were really marketed to youth with a lot of the flavors and those kind of things. So they're more prevalent among youth than cigarettes or traditional tobacco products are.
Yes.
I'd like to just comment, I would really like to recognize Officer Jessica Johnson for bringing this matter forward, and also I know that she's been doing a lot of education in the community with parents and children, and so I thank her for that.
I will pass that on. And she also participates in a program to educate students who have been caught with these devices as well. So it's not just an enforcement arm. We have an education program that the school and Officer Johnson have developed, or I should say adopted. It was an existing program to provide some education to these students, generally in lieu of punishment, as long as they complete the education. So,
Any other comments, questions? Thank you, Chief. All right, can we have was there any questions or comments without the chief to staff or anything like that before I move to a vote here? Yep.
I had a question for Ms.
Yep.
Quidnow as the author or the sponsor. I noticed that in paragraph B of the ordinance, we are prohibiting minors under the age of 18 from doing the following: buying, possessing, et cetera, falsely representing your age. In both the federal statutes for possession of nicotine devices, which include e-cigarettes and the cartridges, and also state law currently for prohibiting the use of these items by minors for nicotine particularly, those regulations pertain to the clerks and the retailers and the sale of the devices to minors.
Correct.
Whereas in your section B, you are prohibiting the actual minor from doing the possession of the use. Can you talk about your rationale for providing that? Whereas
So-
state and federal statutes don't.
I did look that up as well, and I am going to say that there are several students underneath the age of 18 who do work in those capacities. But Chief, do you have anything that you would like to have to address about what her question is?
I want to make sure I understand the question correctly, Mrs. Bishop. The federal statutes prohibit someone from selling the items to someone under age 21?
Right, they're focused on prohibiting the retailer from making the sale to a minor, and they have penalties for making that sale, usually geared toward the retailer, not even necessarily the clerk. They don't necessarily have penalties for the minor attempting to make the purchase, or even for falsely representing their age to the retailer. Whereas our statute here then penalizes the minor for the action as well.
Thank you for clarifying. I guess I didn't understand your question.
I probably did not ask it well, I apologize.
I appreciate that clarification.
You want me to respond, Ms.
Go
Quidnow?
for it.
Okay. Correct. So the existing statutes related to possession of tobacco products or the traditional tobacco products like cigarettes or chewing tobacco or those kind of things, in the state of Wisconsin, the state statutes target both. They target both the individual who's attempting to purchase and the person who would sell it to the underage person. The federal statute or the federal law that was passed as part of an executive order in 2019, I believe, does dictate only those or prohibits those retailers from selling to people under the age of 21. I can't say why they did it. I would suspect it's because tobacco products have federal tax stamps and are regulated federally. So they felt that they could regulate the retailers who are selling them, but maybe cannot regulate the individuals who are buying them. I don't know. It's probably easier for them to regulate the sale by the retailer than it is the buyer. Whereas locally we can regulate both sides, but we can certainly regulate the underage individual who is purchasing. I guess I won't guess on whether it's similar for alcohol or other things, where federally it's regulated from the retail side, but locally or statewide it's regulated from the purchaser side.
Okay, thank you for that. I just want to point out that the federal legislation does include, you mentioned like nicotine and cigarettes. My reading of nicotine and cigarettes at the federal level is that they included tobacco product to include the e-cigarette and the e-liquid. So from that perspective, I do feel like it is covered at the federal level. Now, you mentioned an important piece, which is local enforcement, which this would do here. So I think that's your rationale for bringing the local enforcement to be able to go both ways, both to enforce the sale from the retailer, so stopping it that way, and then to stop or incentivize the minor from not purchasing. And, okay, I understand that. Now, the second part of Michelle or Ms. Cornell, your ordinance is to prohibit the use of an electronic smoking device on school premises.
What section is that?
That's on the second page, section E.
Thank you.
So I went through the school board policy, and they are allowed by state statute to embody a broad array of policies related to actions of people either on school grounds or at off school premises, but school-supported activities. And so they have a litany of policies that are related specifically to students, to professional staff, to support staff, I think was the other one, to visitors, and then whether those visitors and staff and students are school property or an off-school property sponsored event. And the language is contained and very consistent throughout, and it says electronic smoking, vaping devices, et cetera, not allowed on campus, off campus by any of these personnel, again, the staff, the students, the visitors. So I guess I'm struggling to see if the board has these policies that prohibit the use that we're looking at in this ordinance on school grounds. I'm guessing I'm failing to see the need for the ordinance. I don't know if we even can dictate that on school premises since it's a different government entity. Can you help me understand that more?
I think consistency is what the driving force for this as well, because I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, Attorney Drescher too, but I believe there's a state statute that does prohibit the possession of tobacco products, or the use of tobacco products rather, on school grounds, but there's not equivalent state statute regarding these devices.
But what I'm getting at is the school board policies by the Lake Mills Area District School Board address this specifically, and then they give the district administrator very broad authorities to, if somebody is violating the policy, even if it's an adult visiting, the broad authority is you can ask them to leave. If they don't leave, then they bring in the police force for a trespass action. The student handbook also has policies that reiterate the school board policies that would say if a student is using this in violation of the policy, then I think the remedies were a citation, detention, or suspension. So it seems like the school board has already addressed this at their level. What is the need for the city to then come in and put in a municipal site for a student where they might have to then appear before the judge?
So I would agree that it's a redundancy. You know, it's basically two bodies now having the ability to enforce a similar policy or ordinance in this case. The benefit of it, I would say, is that it gives us the flexibility that if the school district wants our assistance to be able to take some sort of enforcement action that they cannot take, that we have that option available. That would be the primary benefit.
And I would echo exactly what you said, because ultimately you can tell a student or many students 1 time, 2 times, 3 times even with a suspension, that does not stop them from bringing those devices in. And it allows the school resource officer to go to the extent of filing or of garnering a ticket for that particular student. It's punitive, yes, but it's further reinforcement of the fact that those rules are in place for the safety of all who are attending that building. So I see what you're saying as far as the redundancy, and I think it also, I think you were speaking to this, it is also in a Wisconsin state statute as well, just not with the e-cigarette necessarily, correct?
I believe that is correct.
With regard to nicotine and tobacco, that is accurate.
Yeah.
And I guess I would just add, and going back to the conversation when we discussed our SRO agreement too, is we really work, our SRO works with the school district to determine how some of these things are handled. So if the school district consults with Officer Johnson and says, we want to handle this way through our school policy, and that we think this is adequate and she's in agreement, then that's how we deal with it. However, if they are unable to deal with it under their policy effectively to prevent it from continuing, we have an option now that we have another approach that we can take. Whether that will work or not, I don't know, but it's another option. So I'm not looking at it as the first option that every time we find somebody with an electronic smoking device, we're writing them a ticket, because that's not the case. I mean, obviously we use discretion every day in things we encounter. So that's a work in progress and a working relationship between our SRO and the school district, that they can decide whether they're going to enforce school policy, whether they're going to enforce municipal ordinance, or both.
I've just really thought long and hard about this since it was first introduced. And again, I see both sides. I see the gaps. I see the enforcement issue on the school side, Ms. Quinn but that drives me then to look at, like, why is the behavior happening from the student side? And I get that officers have discretion. I just have a hard time criminalizing an act by a student who their brain isn't fully formed and they may even be addicted to a substance. It seems to me that they need help at the school and parental level, as opposed to an ordinance level that could then again have a municipal site attached to it. So from that perspective, I'm struggling on this bill. The other perspective is just that it seems like the school board really has this covered through all of their policies, again, through all of the potential people who would be coming on campus who could possibly be either using in front of the students or the students themselves. And my point of view typically is to let things be resolved at the lowest level of either government or management and leadership. And so it seems to me, looking through the school board policy, that that's really been done here. And, you know, I think it's an education piece. As you mentioned, Officer Johnson does do an education piece, and I think that's part of the officer discretion from the school resource officer perspective, and that the school can utilize. And I also believe that the school does already have an enforcement mechanism through law enforcement, through a trespass action or citation otherwise. So that's another reason why I'm struggling with the broad strokes that this ordinance is taking in regard to enforcement for students here.
So I can speak to the brain development piece, because you're absolutely right. The frontal lobe of a child is not fully developed until they're 25, and so the impulse control is greatly prohibited. And they're, you know, teenagers generally do things that are not well thought out because of that. And part of what the school policy has in place is to prevent and to give that cushion of understanding. From my experience and my perspective on this particular situation, there's only so much that a school district can do within, you know, using their school resources like their social work, their counselors, their even extended county services are being utilized for these particular kids. It's the problem that comes into play when they bring these things into the school property, share them with other kids, or even sell them to other kids. And because they are flavorful and sweet and they smell like candy, and I would know because my room is literally across from the bathroom, so I get to experience it on the regular. But the point is that we do need to have something that's a little bit more concrete to make sure that they understand that after all of these other resources have been exhausted, this is really what we can do that's going to send a message also to parents. Because sometimes, I hate to say it, but not every student comes from a supportive household where where the parent would reinforce what the school is trying to do. So it's no different than truancy tickets. We have things that we have to do because it's for the safety of the student, not necessarily because we want to punish based on that. Do you understand what I mean?
I completely understand, respectfully disagree on some of those points. And again, I see the district administrator, the building administrators, and the students and the teachers and principals having a lot of authority in their role as educators to approach this issue. And again, even from the standpoint that some families and parents are not supportive of the student, really, a lot of this is still a school board issue, right? It is still ultimately a parental issue, and I have a hard time, again, criminalizing bringing kids in front of court as a scare tactic when, again, their brains are probably addicted to the substance and they need different kinds of help. So that's just where I stand on it at this point.
Just one point of clarification, since you said it twice, this is not criminal, and it can't be confused. It's not a misdemeanor, it's not a felony.
Municipal site, right?
It's an ordinance violation, it's akin to a forfeiture, so just for clarification.
No, thank you. Language matters. I appreciate that. I did say municipal site at one point, and I got away from that language. So I do understand it's not necessarily a criminal matter. But I don't think that level of enforcement is appropriate in this instance. So thank you.
Did you have something?
That's what I was going to ask, was about whether this was a criminal violation, and it sounds like it's not. Thank you.
So was school administration, were they brought in on this, and did they provide feedback?
Yeah, so Officer Johnson spoke with school administration about this at the onset of when the idea first came up, of her realization that we didn't have an enforcement arm through the police department and an ordinance, and they were on board with the ordinance in both aspects, not only the possession for under 18, but the possession on school grounds.
Okay, but the possession on school grounds, let's be very clear, can be enforced by law enforcement through a trespass action, can it not?
I would say if they told somebody to leave and they refused to leave, it could be enforced as a trespass action. I don't believe the simple possession of it when they had a rule that you can't possess it is a trespass. I don't think it equates until there's a request or a directive by the school district or school staff for them to leave the premises and they refuse to leave.
Right, so there are at least 6 policies from the school board on the use and prohibition of the use of these products by the class of people that I mentioned, students, teachers, and visitors. And most of those use the same language, and they say, if somebody is violating these policies or any of the policies of the school board, the district administrator, building administrator, the staff can take action to have them leave and then have that followed up by law enforcement. So I think even a violation of the policy prohibiting e-cigarettes could result ultimately in a trespass action, which is enforcement by law enforcement.
I guess I would disagree with that point in the sense that I don't believe the violation of the school district's policy and them being present and violating the policy equates to trespass.
No, it equates to a school board, or I'm sorry, not a school board, thank you, yes, a legal way to say it, for a school professional to ask the person to leave because
Correct.
they're violating the policy, creating disruption, safety, I mean, like I said, very broad authorities. And if that point, because of the violation of the policy, the person refuses to leave, you get called.
If they refuse to leave when they're directed to, absolutely, that would equate to a trespass. Yes.
So Mrs. Bishop, did you want to take action here, make a motion or anything?
No, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none. Can we have a roll call on ordinance 1251?
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop?
No.
Ms. Quidnow?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-1.
All right, thank you. Next is recommendations for future agendas. So I guess we need to look at the sidewalk policy.
Who put that forth in the first place? Was it the Public Works Board for council approval, or like, what's the process for that?
Are you talking about originally or right now?
Right now.
Oh, well, as Mr. Waters suggested, like, yeah.
The
The sidewalk policy should go through Public Works Board.
It's certainly, well, that would be a standard place to take it through. if you're asking me if the city council can take it up independently, I would say yes, you can. It's your policy. Referring it to the Public Works Board for their input, it certainly would be consistent with the approved strategic plan and probably past practice as well.
And that process-wise, I guess, I'm assuming then that would come to the council first to discuss it and refer it to the Public Works Board? And the reason I ask that is because I think it would be helpful to the Public Works Board if we gave them some direction, if there were some specific things that we felt were important to update versus just like, hey, what do you think? Let's just update this.
Right. I think you could do it either way.
Okay.
So we can take it directly to the Public Works Board. I can take it upon myself to inform them of the recent city council action regarding the College Street reconstruction project and what came out of that, and what may be what I interpret as the direction coming. What I interpret as to how to apply this going forward and what might need to change in that policy in order to reflect the action that was taken tonight, or we can bring it up at the next city council meeting. The city council can essentially say, this is what we would like to see. Public Works Board, what are your thoughts on this? So it's really the avenue that the city council would like to take. If you would like it to move quicker, we can go right to Public Works Board. If you want to take time at this level to talk about it more, you certainly can.
It seems like it primarily comes up when we're doing a street reconstruction in an existing neighborhood, and I think Kyle Street is it for this year, if I recall. So, I mean, I don't think it's super time sensitive, but probably we would, there's plans in our 5-year plan for the next street to be worked on next year, so we'd want to
Yeah, and there will
have
be,
clarity.
there are other streets in that plan, and to your point, the sidewalk policy almost exclusively, in fact, I'll say does exclusively apply to existing neighborhoods because new development is covered by ordinance, which mandates the installation of sidewalks on both sides of the street by the developer.
Anything else on the sidewalk? Yeah, go ahead.
Another item, Mrs. Bishop, I'm curious, after our discussion about the community center policy, I don't know what your thoughts are on incorporating some of tonight's discussion and what your progress is on when you think you could bring it to us.
Yes, I was wrapping it up, got wind that this was coming before the council, wanted to hear what we had to say before I gave a final draft to the city manager and Misty again for final revision before it comes to us. So next couple of months, I would say.
Great, thanks.
Anything else?
So I'll plan on placing the sidewalk policy on the next Public Works Board agenda.
Yes, please, thank you. Mrs. Bishop?
The Bayberry.
It's not an agenda item, we probably can't talk about that tonight, or can we?
But probably not in any level of detail, no.
Okay.
I'll send out some information.
Okay. Anything else? Do you have something? All right. So we're going to be moving into a closed session for our marathon evening here. So we're convening into closed session to discuss legal claims pursuant to Wisconsin statute Section 1985, Section 1G, conferring with legal counsel who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which it is or it is likely to be involved, and to discuss emergency medical services pursuant to 19.85, Section 1E, for the purpose of deliberating or negotiating the purchase of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specific public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. We will reconvene offline and adjourn from there. So this is the end of our video.
I'll make a motion that we convene into closed session for the reasons just described.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Curler, second by Ms. Quidnow. Any discussion? All those in favor? 5-0. We're moving into closed session. Thank you.